You know what's fucking scary though? When you grocery shop for yourself, you're like, oh man, I just spent like fucking $50. It's only gonna cover for me for a week. And then you go grocery shopping with your parents, and it's like $300.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you afford having a family these days?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So
Most people don't. That's why they stopped having
Chris had
them.
to like pat his mom on the shoulders, like, I've discovered a new pain you had to deal through.
I know. Jesus, I would have let my kids starve in a heartbeat.
Welcome to episode 77 of the Endless Backlog Podcast, the #1 amateur hour podcast, hosted by me, Gagan saying, hope all is well where you are. Joining me today is Christopher Compton.
Hello, everyone.
Benjamin Minkoff.
Hello.
William Berger.
What it is.
And Matthew Crandall.
Hey, how's it going?
Got that right. Nice.
Congratulations, you got everybody's name.
Yeah, what a good
host. Okay. I'm gonna remember to do this next week and let one of you do the opening, just so I can go, alright, who remembers Matthew's last name, you sons of bitches?
Crandall.
You all say it. Yeah, obviously, it's easier to say it now. We'll see
writing it down, don't worry.
We'll see, right?
This is an unusually large normal cast for us. We've got 5 people.
Yeah, we usually run 4 people deep, but I figured out what the fuck. Because
but Matt is getting 2 appearances in this year.
2 appearances.
It's only February. February.
He's getting them out of the way now, so he doesn't have to do them later in the year. You know.
You already doubled it from last year.
New personal best.
For XCOM, and I'll be here again for XCOM. Then you'll never see me again.
New personal best for Matt Crandall.
You say this, but aren't you going to end up playing Uncharted 4?
I don't have a PS4 yet. I might be around for Firewatch. That's right after
Deus Ex.
Deus Ex, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a while away though. I got time to hide.
Firewatch is next week, isn't it?
It's it's next week. The end of next week.
So if that game ends up being really good, this has been a really strong fucking start to the year.
Yeah, I'm pretty hopeful.
Because as I like
what
to
else
put it,
came out?
Well, there was the goatness, and then there was the saddest video game of all time.
Can we use actual titles, please?
The Witness
is the audience.
The Witness. Also known as the Goatness, or Game of the Year 2016, whichever one you want to call it.
So
all
it's getting third place this year.
All
is what you're saying.
Don't do this, Gagan. I don't need your anti-hype.
That was good.
That was well played, William.
Destroyed.
Starting this podcast off with a now, right? Hold on. The saddest game of all time is That Dragon Cancer, because video games will never be sadder than that video game. Like, hold that L for the rest of life video games. And XCOM 2, which is in 4 days from this recording. By the time this podcast is up, it's already out.
Yep.
And then if Firewatch is good, that's a really strong start today, and we still have Street Fighter 5, and that's a February game. That's 2 months in. You know what I mean?
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, then we got Quantum Break and Uncharted 4, Deus Ex is this year. Like, we got a wide selection of games, so...
Yeah, it's shaping to be a good year.
Yeah. I'm excited for this upcoming weekend. Super Bowl Sunday, Ben? Huh?
Yeah?
Huh?
That's the end of the year, man.
Yeah. The podcast will already be up probably after that Super Bowl, but who you got this Sunday? Who you got?
Panthers. Easy.
Carolina. William, I'm guessing Carolina?
You know... I'm going to go with my gut. The last 2 times it's worked, Carolina. So I'd love to see Peyton Manning win and walk off into the sunset, but I'm pretty sure the only reason that exists is because of John Elway, so that we could think that thing could actually happen in professional sports, and the Panthers are going to whip that ass.
Yeah.
Yep.
Christopher obviously doesn't care.
Wow, I think I just slipped into a coma.
You say this, but you always end up watching the Super Bowl one way or another.
That's because, like, the last 2 years I've watched it, ridiculous shit has happened.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you got to watch, otherwise you're going to be in for a really boring
otherwise
game.
We'll be in for a boring game. Because even the blowout was, like, at least interesting to watch, because it was like, wow, Seattle's really beating the shit out of them.
It was interesting to watch the first, quarter or two.
Once the coin toss was flubbed, man, that was a
Yeah,
sign. Nobody
was a
knew,
sign.
but that was a
That was-
sign.
That was the moment I tuned in.
That's what we tuned in. Anyway, opening rant material, because I'm going to leave the floor. If anyone's got a rant in them today, you're going to get the floor for a second. Well, obviously I want to lead with this. Just throwing this out there. So, I was playing XCOM, and we'll get to it, but apparently there's a late game bug in that game, which I thought I hit, because I was Googling what the fuck was happening in this final mission, and not understanding why this door wasn't opening. And on the wiki page, I found... Wiki page, Chris.
Wikipedia?
No, wiki page.
Yeah.
Anyway, I found that for some people there is a game-breaking bug where after you kill the two... What are those things called? The septipods? Matthew?
Yeah, sure.
It's the
which one?
bipedal machines.
The giant one that shoots the lasers and shit, the rocket launcher. Yeah. I think it's Sectopod.
Yeah, the septipods, there's supposed to be a mutton elite, which are like the brute motherfuckers, right? He's supposed to spawn, and then that's when the final door opens, right? And you go fight the final boss area. And it wasn't opening for me, right? Apparently I had to go back in the level and find the one enemy I missed, and I was impatient as fuck waiting for this door to open. So I Googled. The whole time I'm thinking, but here's what I'm really trying to get at. Let's say I had gotten that bug. Let's say that's exactly what had happened to me. That game has been out, Enemy Within, since 2013. Firaxis is a fantastic developer. Civilization's a great series, from my understanding. Sid Meier, it's pretty fucking rad. But, however, I have this crazy opinion that bugs should be patched. You know?
That's
Especially when you make a shit ton of money. But
That's absurd, man.
let's say
absurd.
all bugs cannot be patched, because that's difficult. I at least think that an endgame bug, when all developers complain about shit like, well, people aren't going to see this content because majority of gamers don't make it to the end of our game. I think that a bug that is at the very end of your fucking game, essentially only going to affect the people that appreciated your game enough to make it to the finish line,
Fuck those people.
to the point where said bug ends up on your goddamn wiki page of your game, should be patched.
Was it the wiki page of bugs?
No. It was the XCOM wiki. But
Like, there's different parts of a wiki, is what I'm saying.
Well,
You
it was...
know how like every game, like the Metal Gear Solid wiki,
Ben understood
like-
what I was saying, but Ben's being an asshole right now. But really, it's the XCOM Enemy Within wiki page. It was the wiki page for the literal final missions page, right? And it has the strategy. It has a strategy for a mission, and it even has a bugs section, by the way. And that shit was actually longer than one bug. And I was just thinking, why? Because this game has been out since 2013. They're making XCOM 2, which, by the way, has had glowing reviews. And here we are, and it still has that bug. That is unacceptable, so fuck that. And other rant, not a big rant, I guess we'll keep it in check. But before we were even starting this podcast, dear fucking developers, please cut it out with the mandatory tutorials. I don't fucking need to be told how the controls work. I played video games since about the mid-90s, so at this point I know how controllers work. I'll just press the goddamn buttons to figure out what does what. It's not a hard concept for me.
Think about that 10-year-old whose first game is Rise of the Tomb Raider for some reason.
Yes, and here's the other thing. When you have a tutorial and you make it optional, that's all there needs to be. Sometimes, when I get the optional tutorial, half the time I do actually end up saying yes, just to see, alright, whatever, I'll sit through the tutorial.
See what happens.
And at least then I feel happy, knowing that it was my own decision-making. When it's forced on me and it's getting offensive, I'm just like, fuck you. Alright? Like, we can at least cut this out. Like, Dark Souls, I understand we can't all just put markers down on the ground to read tutorials, because that only makes sense in the context of the Souls games, because they have a literal mechanic for that type of stuff.
Right.
But, listen, game developers are supposed to be creative, so get creative with how you're going to teach me your game. Added bonus, if your tutorial is something that doesn't represent the meat and potatoes of your gameplay, why the fuck is that your tutorial? Why is that your opening? Why is that the beginning of your game? For instance, Skyrim, from my understanding, is this open world RPG where a lot of like emergent gameplay can happen because of the systems and all that crap in that game, right? Why is the opening of that game you being on a fucking carriage in first person watching a whole bunch of people talk, and then a bombastic set piece plays where you move the analog stick forward?
You need to be immersed in the world.
That doesn't.
Focus groups.
Yeah, it's almost like other games got you immersed in games without doing that shit.
Oh man, you know what gets me the most immersed is when there's a woman voiceover and then they show a video of the guy doing something and then you have to do it and then a cutscene happens. So immersive.
Mm-hmm. So immersive. Max immersive. So
what games have you been playing, Gagan, that bring these to your mind?
Rise of the Tomb Raider. And earlier, like literally before this podcast, I started Dragon Ball Xenoverse, which I rented from Gamefly. So,
which is fantastic.
Which, I mean, fantastic is pushing it. But the tutorial was bullshit because Trunks would not shut the fuck up. And there's so many fucking pop-ups on the screen. Like, it's the old days of AOL and you had just got done watching porn or something. What the fuck?
What?
Chris wouldn't understand. He never had an AOL. What
analogy was that?
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Papa Bad suck.
Yeah, Papa Bad suck.
You're familiar with
the kids these days will not understand that concept. Papa Bads, what the fuck are those? You know, because they don't know anything in a non-adblock world.
I guess that was
Assholes.
a kid's voice.
They don't know what we had to go through.
They don't know the struggle.
They don't know the struggle you had to go through to watch porn on AOL.
They don't understand what it's like to have a parent going, "Hey, get off the internet. I need to use the telephone." They don't understand that.
That I remember.
Ooh, I remember that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Playing StarCraft on the internet was a struggle, man.
Anyway, before we get into games I played, we're supposed to have a newsy section. Ben, come on, we have an itinerary there. Opening rant was just out of line. Actually, does anyone else have a rant or thing they just want to shit on right now?
I was going to say the same thing about tutorials, mostly because playing Spyro, which we'll get to, but it was like, yo, do you remember how to do this? It was like, yes, I literally just finished the first game.
To be fair to that game, okay, there was a first game before it. That's at least the 90s. When video games were meant to be stupid, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of endearing in its stupidity, but it's still really annoying where it's like, can you jump?
Yeah, you know what all this reminds me of is the whole, you've seen it, I know, and Matthew's probably seen it. It's the Ego Raptor Mega Man video, the sequelitis, where he's like, there's a great, like, increase in the, yeah, I get it. And it's like, that's what it is. For some stupid reason, we just thought the people playing video games got dumber. And trust me, there's plenty of evidence of that out there. But, like, more and more studies... I actually listened to this on Beastcast the other... I want to say Beastcast, Ben...
Yeah, the Beastcast.
I think Austin Walker brought up the idea that people understand basic, like, rules and systems a lot easier than you would understand. What you really need to present to people isn't necessarily how to do something. It's why they should do something. Like, what's the value of wall running as opposed to do this wall run? Like, that they could just figure out messing with the controls. But, yeah.
That comes up, yeah.
You know, I don't appreciate when you're in a really hot shower and you get out and the floor tiles are cold. It's fucking brutal, man.
That's why you have a mat, man.
Yeah, that's why you invest in mats.
But then, like, the mat gets wet and it sticks to the floor.
Yeah, but that's why you gotta get, like, one of those really good mats.
Get, like, a nice bath mat and you'll have this problem.
My parents have those
understand.
heated floors, and that's really nice.
Nice. Heated floors.
Those do sound nice, though.
That's good.
That's my
wow, this guy has heated floors and he's complaining about cold tiles.
Well, no, he's away at campus or something.
Yeah, I'm poor and I live in an apartment by myself.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I wouldn't say I'm poor. But...
He's working these days. These aren't, Chris is going through the struggle of discovering...
Man,
now you're discovering why your parents bought mats. Now you are understanding every time your mom would complain. He's like, don't do that with the mat. And you're going, Mom, it's a mat. It's not that serious. It's not even an important part of the house's furniture. But now
also, my shower curtain, like, folds sometimes and the water gets out. And I play, like, a game of trying to stick the shower curtain to the sides of the walls.
This is the
Maybe you should get a nicer shower curtain.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is the things you do when you're naked and showering.
Yeah. Just so you all have that. Just so that you all have that mental picture.
Chris, you have some really exciting times in the shower, man. I don't even mean like the usual way you'd think.
If I die,
really,
if I die, it's gonna be because I was trying to fucking fix the shower curtain, slipped out on the cold tile floor, and smacked my head on the goddamn toilet seat. That's gonna be it.
You'll notice how he throws cold tile floor in there.
I know, the tiles would have been on. It's like he needs you to know.
It all comes
Listen,
together.
My tiles are not heated. They're unacceptably cold. Anyway, quick news, even though only one of us actually plays one of these games anymore. Hearthstone and Rainbow Six Siege got significant updates. Rainbow Six got a new Defender character, which that game desperately needs because it's got too many good attacking characters. Plus, they've adjusted certain things about it on a mechanical level to tweak it. And Hearthstone, I don't really understand what they added. I know they added deck slots.
I can
Okay,
explain it.
so Matt, do you want to explain this or should I?
I can do it, except if you want to. I don't care.
I want it
But
done
I
as
can't.
quickly as possible because
All right, let me do
Okay.
it then. Okay, so
Okay.
there's these things in Magic called formats. Basically, they have a format for current cards and non-current cards. What this does is it makes competition easier and also forces people to buy new cards. So usually what happens is you can only use cards from the last 2 years to the last X number of sets, right? Previously, Hearthstone didn't have those because it was a new game. But now Blizzard has decided that they're going to introduce formats. So it will be, I think, either the last 2 years or the two most recent sets, one of the two. Everything else will be in its own format. So it changes the competitive nature of the game and forces people to buy or grind for cards.
It creates more variety. Because
Yes, and forces people to...
And have force people to buy more
Right.
cards, of course.
Yeah.
But also, like, when you like to have everything stuck in the same format all the time, like, the same cards always wind up in the same decks, and it sort of...
It helps the
what you
game's
do.
metagame. Yeah.
Yeah. Keeps mixing things
It
up.
doesn't help the metagame so much as it changes it. I would argue that it actually makes it worse, because unless you have whatever the current hot thing is, you're going to lose. Whereas in older formats, you can get by with older cards.
You could also argue that it limits the advantage that, like, early movers have early people have coming into the game. Like, if you're new and you have to have every card from, like, all the sets, then it's really hard to catch up. But if you only have to have cards from the most recent sets, it's easier to jump in.
That is true. So it's,
You know,
it's
like,
a double.
it's like if you want to get into, like, the oldest Magic format that has cards from every single set now, like, all the key cards you want would, like, cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
It's been a while since I've actually played Hearthstone. There was a good while 2 years ago where I played a lot of Hearthstone.
I'm, like, Hearthstone free for a year and a half now, and I've never felt better.
Yeah, never felt better.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you miss it a little bit? It was a good game.
Nope.
It's a really good game.
It was a good game.
Ben should just be proud of his accomplishment and keep his 2-year pen.
Yeah, I guess because 2 year fit is like the drinking problem. Anyway.
Hearthstone is pretty addictive.
Last bit of news, and you could tell we were fishing for news because seriously,
It's January.
Yeah, I know.
In February.
Yeah.
Nothing happens.
I like it. Game publishers not doing something shitty. Well, except for the fact that Namco released a PC port of Tales of Symphonia on, I want to say like a week ago. Who gives a fuck about the release date?
Really
Now,
recently.
Let's get some context in. Ben doesn't like this game, and it's the only Tales game he's ever played, and he's completely written off the Tales series since then. I played it, and I remember liking it on the GameCube. But since then, I've thought the Tales games just suck.
This port came out February 1st.
Yeah, whatever. Is that important, though?
Which was
But
yesterday.
that came out yesterday. Anyway, it's
As of this
freaking 30
recording,
frames on the PC, which, as anyone knows about gaming, 30 frames is an unacceptable frame rate for video games. It's borderline unplayable. It's unacceptable. It's only acceptable when you are playing Bloodborne and other Souls games.
Well, like, to get, like, it's basically a port of the PS3 version, which is a port of the
PS2
PlayStation
version.
2 version,
Yeah.
which is a port of the GameCube version.
Yeah.
And the GameCube
like
version ran at 60 frames per second. the
Only
PS2
during
version
battle. Only during battle.
The PlayStation
But
2 version did
because
not.
the PS2 version and the PS2 was just a less technically...
And since
a dev
then, all the
console-
versions have been at 30 frames per second.
Right, like, listen, the important part here isn't that a stupid-ass Tales game's got a bad port on PC. Listen, there are good games on the PC, go play those instead. The real thing I wanted to point out was that Durante, I don't actually remember his actual name. I actually do have...
Peter
Wait,
or
no. Wait, I have the article up, actually. His name is Peter Toman? I want to say that's Toman. Whatever. The point is, he's Durant on...
NeoGAF.
NeoGAF. He is wildly known for the fixes for Dark Souls and the Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns port on the PC. Basically, he's like a one-stop shop of keep sending your shitty ports, he will fix them, unless it's Batman Arkham Knight, because that's really broken. And he wrote an article for PC Gamer, which I thought was actually really well made, and he pointed out that Yeah, I like that he pointed out that too many people, when they do this type of article, paint too much in broad strokes. I liked that he pointed out that Japanese ports actually aren't that bad on PC in the grand scheme of things. They've gotten a lot better. Capcom's gotten really good at them. Sega's really good at them. There's a lot of smaller publishers that do a fantastic job. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is a fantastic PC port.
Falcom puts out pretty solid work.
Falcom puts on solid ports, and he points out that when the ports are good, Dragon's Dogma, Valkyria Chronicles, and Hyperdimension Neptunia, they all went on to be successful games on Steam, which, considering at least two of those games are actually all three of those games are niche in the grand scheme of things. Like, Dragon's Dogma is technically a AAA product.
Yeah.
But, it was also like a bajillion years old. Like
a bajillion years old.
I mean, whatever. It's a 4-year-old game. It's a 4-year-old game, since Chris needs us to be technical. I believe that game came out in 2012. And here we are in 2016. It's just now on the PC. But it's a fantastic port. Valkyria Chronicles was a game from 2008. Yes, it was $20, so that helps it get to, I want to say it's at 600,000 owners. But again, good port, good sales, people are happy. That game also happens to be fantastic.
Bad ports.
Bad ports do
like
not sell.
Tecmo's games.
Yeah, so he spent a lot of that time just bad-mouthing Tecmo Koei, publishers of the crime and blight against humanity known as Dynasty Warriors. And
what a developer, what a studio, what a publisher.
What a horrible company. Anyway, so I'm going to go on the limb and say those ports actually aren't good, and from my quick check of... I mean, normally I would look at their Steam reviews and say, yeah, mostly negative. This makes sense to me. But now I'm starting to think it probably has more to do with the ports than people having good taste and realizing Dynasty Warriors is garbage. Right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So it's unacceptable. I think it's a good read. We're not really going to get super technical about it, but I agree with the general consensus about it. PC ports should not be shit. It's a flexible platform. The audience for it is a bunch of older people in comparison to console audiences.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things he gets into with the article is, this Tales of Symphonia port is technically really bad in a lot of ways. Right. There are lots of basic PC things that it should have that doesn't, just like the resolution stuff. It's something that he says, he figured this out in less than, in about 15 minutes, he was able to create an easy fix.
Right.
And that's not in the port.
Yeah.
And there are all these weird localization issues.
Yeah.
There's random bugs with Windows 7. It's there's all lots of problems that make it almost worse than the PS3 version.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't happen for a PC game.
Absolutely. Sure.
But even more than that, what pisses him off in the article, and this kind of goes to a lot of the problems Japanese developers have, is that even though this port was clearly done for nothing, that they just made the quickest, cheapest thing they could possibly make and threw out the door, which people actually can't really refund since a lot of them got as a pre-order bonus for another Tales game that came out.
Mm-hmm.
So they got it for free with a game that they already played more than 2 hours of. Right. So you can't even refund it, really.
Yeah.
But even though they made this quick, cheap port, they still spent money on the shitty DRM that barely even works.
Mm-hmm.
So bullshit. That was a priority.
Genius.
But not making
paying
the port
someone
good.
For an hour of work to add scalable resolution was not a priority.
I mean, yeah, it's the same thing with Warner Brothers ports last year. The DLC was a priority, but actually making the port good for Mortal Kombat and Arkham Knight was yeah, we don't really need to do that,
But it's even just basic functionality. They don't... The publisher... So it shows that a lot of these publishers just have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
That there's any possible payoff for just doing a decent job, and they're cutting off their nose to spite their face with decisions like that. To make it harder to mod the game to fix these issues, and they don't actually solve these problems themselves.
Yeah.
And that article is kind of another effort just to get publishers like Namco, like Koei Tecmo, just to actually do an okay job.
Yeah, because we're at that stage where a PC audience is there for Japanese games.
Yeah, and we're seeing it over and over.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Like, the modern PC gamer, I would argue, is not the person who was raised on Planescape and Fallout and Baldur's Gate. I would argue a lot of modern PC gaming is console gamers who grew up, got jobs, and are financially secure enough that they were able to build their own PCs because they're that much of gaming enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. Right? What's up?
Yeah, and as you kind of were saying, a lot more console parts started coming towards the PC with the 360 PS3 generation.
Yeah.
So you didn't really lose the variety that you would have lost like 5 years prior to that.
Yeah.
And then with Steam coming into its own with all its sales, it became almost a financially attractive option.
Yeah, it's
in a way that wasn't before.
Like you're picking a lesser option when you stick to the consoles these days, which, whatever.
And there's a market for Japanese games, and these publishers just have to just listen.
Just make an optimized port.
And spend just a little bit more than they are already spending just to cover the basics.
You would think they would make more. So here's my question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Japan has become a mobile market, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking pure dollars, I want to make as much money as humanly possible. I'm not even going to bother trying to spend money on shit that's not going to make me money, right? If I'm that type of publisher, why am I keeping people around that want to make, console games or whatever, right? Because my audience, at least if I'm in Japan, you need to be able to sell at home first, right? Mm-hmm. Why would I not make cell phone games the whole time, right? That's my first thing. So the fact
that happens most of the time, a lot,
and that does happen. I'm saying, but they do keep certain people around that want to make proper console games because they loyalty or because they feel there's money there, right?
Yeah, right.
So if you're one of those publishers at this point, you need to accept the following thing: barring Final Fantasy 15 saving the Japanese console industry, because that's literally the only game I can think of that can really move that space ever again, right?
That's what everybody's looking. I mean, even in Japan, that's what it's looked at as.
Barring Japan getting its Wii, some new messiah that's going to change gaming in Japan, right? That's the one. Otherwise, the console market's not there, so it seems like they're a little bit more dependent on Western gamers' money than they were, say, during the PS2 era. Is that a fair assessment to have that opinion?
Absolutely.
Yes. For console games, yeah.
Okay, so with that context there, and all the evidence of modern gaming showing you that the PS4 version is going to sell a shit ton, right? That's where you're going to get the majority of your sales, right? Ideally, that should be a great port. No question. We're not even a port. Yeah. That should probably be your primary platform of choice to optimize that game for. And then, for the most part, the PC and Xbox One are dead even. If not dead even, the PC is actually winning in terms of selling SKUs. It's the number 2 SKU, from my understanding these days. Especially because now games sell even more digitally than they used to, right?
It helps, yeah.
Yeah, so you have Steam, which at this point sells games like it's going out of... You barely have to market, and sometimes it feels like with Steam these days, right? My question is, how do they even justify being ignorant towards the PC anymore? Because back in the day, it made some sense, because it was it's your third SKU. Your third SKU is the one you're not going to give a shit about. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? So I question why now. It's now your number 2 SKU. You get what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
So
I mean, it could be that they just don't have the
technical prowess to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
but that doesn't make any sense in the case of now. Mm-hmm.
I think one thing to keep in mind with Japan is that PCs never really had the same kind of penetration, home PCs, as in Japan as it did in the US.
Yeah.
I think most internet use in Japan, for going back years, back to, Japan had phones that could use the internet a good 10 years before, we got smartphones in the US.
Right.
And a lot of internet use happened on the phone in Japan.
Right.
So, I mean, PCs weren't as much a part of people's households.
Right.
As they were in the US. And I think a lot of publishers just aren't very comfortable with the idea of the PC market in general.
Mm-hmm.
It was always very, very, very niche in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they really they don't really see it as a thing. It's so like it's just an unusual thing to them. It's very foreign.
Right.
Kind of like how a lot of publishers were for a while, I guess, with phone games.
Mm-hmm.
At first, this is just like a completely new territory. You don't even know what you're supposed to do. Or when people were like trying to bring stuff to handhelds, they didn't really know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Like PSP and stuff, I guess. I don't know if that's great.
Like
analogy.
the Western, it kind of makes sense. I would argue the Western developers never found the success on the handhelds that Japanese devs did.
Yeah.
Like it hasn't been close when you think about the most successful handheld games.
Mm-hmm.
Like
and,
now, what's if it's not a phone game, right? Like what's the most successful Western handheld? Tetris?
I mean, is that really Western?
It's Russian. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Like after Tetris, it's maybe a God of War game, one of those God of War games, right?
Or like those, that's sort of stuff on the PSP, but
yeah, but I'm saying like that's not God. That God of War game is also the least successful God of War game, whereas DS Mario is actually pretty high. Like it only looks bad in the context that Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario World have absurd numbers for sales, right?
Right.
Like Super Mario DS, new Super Mario Brothers DS, that game must have sold. I mean, there were years after that game came out, it was in the NPD's top 10.
I want to say that game sold like 20-something million copies, something like that.
I feel like that's lowballing it, honestly. I feel like that game could easily be. I would not be surprised that's a 30 million game.
Well, yeah, like it's like you saw it first with the PSP. Like publishers are putting out games where they're like 2-minute loading times.
Yeah, like you can't do that.
And, it's like there are things that aren't going to work in this format, and it took people time to like navigate that and figure out whether or not they should prioritize that. And then, eventually they moved to cell phones, and people started to figure that out more, and that was a thing. And I think for a lot of these Japanese publishers, they're more worried. Yeah, I guess you can see with Tales, they're more worried about piracy, and they see it more as like piracy is danger. Is a bigger danger than it is an opportunity. That the platform is an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that, like, they may not be like, because what Ben said, like the PC is kind of a relatively new market in that space. They may not be completely aware of what the expectation is for something like that.
Yeah, because even the good ports aren't like littered with the options you want in a PC game.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't think they're incapable of doing it. I just don't think they understand that aspect of the culture. Whereas in the US and Canada and Europe, the appeal of PC gaming is customization. I can run this however I want.
And you can see the publishers that got into it earliest are the ones that have adapted the best because they made some of them made those mistakes, and then they solved them. Capcom is a great example.
Capcom's Devil May Cry 3 port is
Devil May Cry 3 port
and the first Resident Evil 4 port are so fucking. Even the second one actually isn't that good when you think about it, because it's like the game plays better now because the game always played exceptional, but the QuickTime events in that game are now awkward because now it's at 60 frames, right? So, like, that actually needed a tweak, which they didn't do, and they're not actual HD texture. It's like one of the worst HD jobs out there is the Resident Evil 4 HD stuff. Doesn't matter, that's the greatest game ever made. But
that time, they hit all the things they needed to hit, whereas with the first port, they couldn't even implement proper controls.
To be fair, that the proper mouse controls had to be tweaked again.
Yeah.
But before it was emulating an analog stick or something.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible.
It was totally fucked.
As for Japanese games that are successful, Splatoon has sold 4 million copies, and unless Nintendo Land counts, and I would argue it's a bundled game, it shouldn't, Splatoon is the best-selling new IP of these new consoles, beating not exactly a laundry list of,
huge games.
World beaters. It's really only Bloodborne that's actually another good new IP that's an exclusive. And then Sunset Overdrive, but that game didn't sell. Yeah. So, good on Splatoon.
Drive Club.
Sold better than Drive Club. I don't think it did better than Titanfall. I'm going to assume, not even going to assume, Destiny and Watch Dogs are probably the 1 and 2. Probably. The 1 and 2.
Yeah, they are.
I would assume Titanfall probably outsold 4 million, but that was on 2 platforms, so.
I mean, EA's been really cagey about how well Titanfall sold. So
I feel like we had a hard time getting sales for a lot of those games. I mean, even Destiny, it's like, how much is it actually sold? Do we have a number on that?
No, they keep sharing how much money that game is.
They share
made,
money,
but
and they share player engagement a lot.
So let me tell you this as an accountant, knowing how certain numbers
it's
are
upwards of 6 million, Ben. We do know that because it's sold more than Watch Dogs.
Knowing how numbers are treated and how people react to certain numbers and how they're gonna pitch numbers to their, the public, right? I would assume that whatever pitch Activision made initially that Destiny was going to make, it has not even come close to those sales because they keep showing how much money that game made and not raw how many copies it sold. Because, whatever, you would think people care more about your profit than whatever copies you sold, but realistically, like, in an entertainment standpoint, they give a huge amount of shit of knowing how many customers you have, right? Because it's not about how much money you're making today, it's also about how much money you're going to keep making, right? When you have 10 million, when you have 10 million people, that means that's your customer base right now. Yeah. Just because
it's done well.
Yeah, it's done well. Like, let's not get carried away. But, it being a bad game, and it is a bad game, happens to be why that game hasn't necessarily... Otherwise, it would have completely destroyed some monster sales numbers for...
I don't think it would have numbers.
Yeah. I think it did better than their most recent Halo outings. But...
Yeah, it seems like they keep sharing the registered users number and not the copies sold number.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to share all these other numbers but that one, it means the game's not doing necessarily as well. Whereas, take The Witcher 3 and Metal Gear Solid 5, they are sharing cold, hard ship numbers if they have to, or so. I mean, shipped, you're a little bit disappointed in your sales as well, I would argue.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. Good on Splatoon. It's the number 5. Yeah.
Couldn't happen to a better game.
Yeah.
I mean, Bloodborne might be higher quality. We can argue that, but I think
some might argue it was the 4th best game of last year, where Splatoon was only 5th.
But Splatoon's a really fresh design.
Yes, it is.
It's a really unique take on that kind of game.
Yeah.
And it's also Nintendo taking a risk with an IP, which they haven't really done in a long time. And I hope this encourages them to do more.
It's like the first good new IP in the third-person shooter genre since...
And by more like that, I mean more new IPs, not more Splatoon.
Since Vanquish? No, Binary Domain came after that. So yeah, Binary Domain. It's been a while.
Wait. Oh, a new shooter IP?
A new third-person shooter that actually was a good game, and it was a new IP. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would be since Binary Domain. A third-person shooter.
Third-person shooter.
Yeah, open world included, but still. And then narrow down.
Harsh on Sunset Overdrive, dude.
Yeah, I guess.
But Sunset Overdrive didn't sell.
Sunset Overdrive is more like a 6, than
Binary Domain didn't sell.
Binary Domain did not sell. No, that's true.
Poor Sunset Overdrive. It deserved to sell better than it did.
It was at least Sunset Overdrive was fresh, if a little, not all that complete. Like, it deserved better than it got on the Xbox One, but, it is what it is. Otherwise, that does it for news. So, honestly, the way I look at it, other than the NX, let's keep the news simple this year. I'm actually fine with this. Less publishers doing shitty things, Maybe Tales of Symphonia can be the only shitty port of the year, let the news
let's not
be
ask for miracles. Guys.
Let's let the news only be the X or Y game was bad. That's fine. Disappointments I'm willing to accept. Full on, I don't know, Konami treating its employees like shit. Or, remember what happened with the people who made the Metro games? That story is depressing as fuck what that studio had to go through. And then they made a bitchin' game. But, moving on.
Let's have good news.
So, XCOM 2 is making a fucking heyday as far as its reviews are concerned. It is a 91 on Metacritic.
Nice.
It is would you call this AAA? What XCOM 2 is? As a game?
Yes.
Production model? Yeah, it has to be AAA.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's a AAA exclusive right now on the PC that's not made by Blizzard or Valve. And Valve
does Valve really make games anymore?
I was gonna say, does Valve really make AAA games anymore?
Valve rides the Dota 2 money train.
What's up? Yeah, let's say Portal 2 would be their last AAA game, and that wasn't an exclusive.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So either way, like, whatever. It's done absurdly well. It's 91 on Metacritic, as we pointed out. It's actually harder these days. It feels like it's harder these days. And the game looks really fantastic. It looks like it's taking advantage of the fact that the PC audience knows what strategy games are, and it's built for the mouse and keyboard, and thus will have even more depth than XCOM, Enemy Unknown, and Enemy Within. Not disrespecting those games, but you're the remake of a game from 1994, and the 1994 game has more depth than you. I do think that is a flaw, whether people like accepting that or not. It is going backwards, one way or another. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, good on XCOM 2 there.
Yeah.
I will throw out one thing. Again, we're throwing shade at some websites. GameSpot needs to get rid of the good and the bad section of their review. Because the review itself is fine. I think it's well written. Not whatever. It's actually perfectly written. I got every point
Fine
you're
review.
trying to make. It's a fine review. But the good and the bad section, because of the nature of how good and bad works on that website, and when you reduce your own statement, right, it loses context. And believe it or not, a full sentence is more descriptive than 3 words. So
What?
when you write, it's a crazy concept. So when you write the words "failure is essential and meaningful," that can mean a whole lot of things.
That's actually 4 words, Gagan.
Whatever. I'm just saying. When I read the part where failure is essential, I'm thinking, why the fuck would the player need it to be essential? Right? It's essential to the genre. I understand that concept. I understand what he was implying in terms of it's meaningful. The threat of failure in these games is exactly why they are so tense. Exactly why. It's how games get their stakes, right? Like, Williams said all this thing about stories and Ocarina of how to add stakes. And to me, that's always been a level of bullshit, because when I think stakes in a movie or in a story, it's conflict, right? In a game, my conflict isn't with some characters when I'm playing. It's
challenges.
It's when I'm challenged by the game. Right? Like, the conflict in Ninja Gaiden isn't that doucheface killed your dad and blew up your village and took the sword. The conflict is, Alma is beating my face in right now, and she's a bitch. And I need to kill her. Right? Like, that's conflict in that game. That is my stakes, is that the game has been handing me my ass. Yeah. Bloodborne, Dark Souls, the stakes is Ornstein and Smog. Those 2 assholes beating the ever-loving shit out of you. Whatever, I beat them on first try because I'm a badass. But those 2 assholes beating you on the first try, that's stakes. The archers that Chris doesn't like.
Yo, fuck those archers.
Yeah. Like, that to me is what...
Capra Demon.
Like, that's where you get your stakes in gameplay. In XCOM, it's when you build a character up from rookie to, like, a badass sniper, and he dies because he missed a 95% shot.
97.
He died at 97, yeah. I lost Raven Simone on 95, right? Speaking of which, by the way...
And then got shot by an alien.
Yeah, and then you get shot by an alien. Funny joke here, XCOM Twitter, official Twitter, wrote that there's a 95% chance XCOM 2 will be coming to consoles. It's so good!
So that shit's not...
My mind!
I was like, you savage bastards. I was like, that is like... It's like, the joke only XCOM fans will get. Like, you'll read on Geff, like, oh, sweet, XCOM's coming to consoles. It's like, oh, honey. It's not how XCOM works.
95 is a very big ocean.
That 5% is a lie. It's a lot bigger than you think it is.
It's same thing in Fire Emblem, man.
So, Enemy Unknown, 2012, I would argue is, if it's not the game of the year that year, it is one of the 5 best games that year. Easily. Right?
Did Endless Backlog exist in 2012?
No, but I mean, like, when you think of that year, I would say the big names for people will be The Walking Dead, Journey, and then of the AAA stuff, it'll be like Mass Effect 3, and then after that, stuff like Dishonored, Hotline Miami, and XCOM. And I'm saying of those 6 games, there's no way XCOM is 6th.
Right.
It's just absurd. Yeah. However, I felt that there were a few, besides the obvious ones, made where UFO Defense is a better game than it, is that I thought there was a little added repetition to the game. I thought alien abduction missions just got boring after a while. Because the nature of that game, you're going to be just more conservative during those missions, because why not? Why would you be in a rush? You get what I'm saying? they added Meld, and Enemy Within is a standalone expansion. The best way I can describe it and make it lazy is that it's Ninja Gaiden Black, and Enemy Unknown is Ninja Gaiden 2004. It's not a completely different game, but there's enough new additions and like added content that makes it the more complete version of that game. And they added mechs in Enemy Within. They added augmented soldiers, so now you can make them like part machine, and they'll get like gene upgrades. So like adds new skill trees your characters can have. And the resource you need to gather is called Meld, right? So now there's 2 points during alien abduction missions where if you don't get to them in a certain amount of turns, they're gone. And if you're playing that game on a higher difficulty, that is going to matter, because that's mechs you can't make. And you want mechs in that game because they are fucking powerhouses, right?
Yeah.
And the added bonus of skill. So adding urgency to the alien abduction missions helped. I would also argue that it was awful that a remake of UFO Defense did not have a base defense mission, and the one that they added in the Enemy Within happens to be one of the most badass missions in that game. So, setup, the game setup is it's going to happen a certain amount of days after you do an alien base invasion mission, right? Which is as simple as you're going to take your crew and you're going to go in and you're going to beat shit, kill motherfuckers. What happens a few months later is that the aliens somehow, I don't want to say they possessed your people. They mind controlled them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they end up like just being in XCOM, and they end up shooting up some dudes. And the game, without any prep time now, and here's the thing, if you don't have the people equipped for this mission gets a lot harder, because this will happen seems like randomly. Like, you're not going to have time to prepare. It is a surprise attack, quite literally. So you're asked to think on your toes. Your top 6 soldiers will be the ones part of this mission, but you open the mission up with only your top 3, right? And like these throwaway recruit squad mates that are meant to be like base security. And you're first off, you're put in this like square room, and you got enemies coming from all sides. You got those stupid stealth squids, that fucking robotic disc shit I hate fighting, because they're always in the air. And it felt like at least 4 of those mutton elites right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
And if you're playing this game, by the way, on Iron Man, the way I was, which is simple, there's no saves coming, right? Like, I took it out of the equation.
Save.
I was going to say, if my XCOM fails, my gameplay will fail. And I bet 8 games beaten on this, and I almost got the bug, and I was going to be tight. But, so basically, without the saves coming, like, I'm just going, oh my fuck. So, like, my all-star soldier, Usain Hardcore Bolt, only has a regular assault rifle because I didn't take him on the last mission, right? I bought 6 of every gun I want to use, and then I take their weapons away when I'm starting a new mission and sending out a new crew, right? Because I do the RPG thing where I try to keep my crew balanced, as opposed to getting dependent on one person. Because, again, I know that people are going to die. Like, I lost Yu Suzuki really early in the game. Rest in peace, Legend of Sega.
But why would you need more than 6 guns? He takes 6 people on the mission.
Why would I need 6? I only take 6 missions. I bought the upgrade for 6, right? I didn't need them. So that was but luckily 2 of my people were mechs. So like first wave, that was tough. And then you gotta like sort of move around the base a little bit more. So I like the mission on 2 fronts. One, I feel like too often in XCOM, what I don't like is that it seems like you need to get past a certain point in that fog of war before the enemies will start doing something, right?
Right.
I like fog of war in the sense that the enemy's also doing something behind that fog. XCOM, it feels like they will do fucking nothing until you get there.
And then you're fucked.
And then you're fucked, which is fine. Like, that's the nature of the nature of the game. I wouldn't necessarily get rid of it. I'm just saying I don't find it nearly as interesting as when, like, at least Fire Emblem, the enemies are doing something all the time. And same thing with Valkyria. They're doing something on their side of the mission, right?
Right.
And this, it felt like now that I was bunkered in, they were actually coming after me. Like, I was them waiting in the fog all of a sudden. Right? So that was interesting. And then, same twist. You had to go. It's a fantastic addition to the game. I would argue Enemy Within is a must play for anyone that likes that style of game. What else did they add that I keep forgetting? Oh, they added the Exalt. This is actually a really cool addition. They added, well, I don't know if this is, I don't know, I guess I don't believe it, but there's like this renegade group that seems to believe that the aliens are our saviors or some bullshit.
Is this an Enemy Within?
The Enemy Within, yes. The Exalt. They were not an Enemy Unknown. They're called the Exalt, and what happens is they make the panic metagame a little bit more interesting because they're the ones they increase the panic in certain areas. And your goal is to eventually find their base. Mm-hmm. Now, at any point, you can guess and say, oh, their base is in the United Kingdom. If you make the wrong guess, the UK will bow out.
Right.
Like, they'll leave, and that's a continent bonus you will not get. So, it's in your best interest to just scan an area and find where you got you send a double agent, effectively. You send someone, go undercover, and then you're going to do one of their missions. I kept sending El Josa, because El Josa is useless to me. So, and great news about this. Anyone that knows our Skype chat, he is left-handed. So ever since we found out that he's left-handed, and it made sense that he's the awful human being that he is, I started calling him a left-handed demon. When it came time to nickname him, and I don't pick anyone's nicknames in the game, I just let the game do it. Like Charlize Theron is Charlize Diesel Theron in that game. I'm like, alright, whatever. Aljosa got demon, and I laughed out loud. So,
life imitating art.
I know, it was a little creepy when it happened, but it was funny at the same time. So I kept sending him, and those missions are interesting in themselves. Sometimes you have to, so there'll be 2 points on the map. One you have to absolutely defend, they cannot get to. The other point is actually, so like the way you would look at it is the 1 point you have to defend is in the fog of war, but they need to get to this other point to actually locate that beacon, right? So you can either choose to be very aggressive and guard that first beacon and completely avoid the scenario that they're going to find the thing they need to get, or you get really conservative and tighten up and just say, fuck it, we're going to lose that beacon anyway, let me just stay back here. And on a normal difficulty, I could see it being really easy to just wreck them on the first one. But when you're playing a game on Classic, I would argue you actually end up doing a little bit of back and forth. You contest them on that first beacon, but you never stop them. You more like bow back once they've sort of got it, right? And then you make sure you defend that fucking last thing you need to defend. Other missions include, what was another one that you have to do? You have to take the covert op that was on your mission. You only send him on with basically a jacket and a pistol. And anyone that's played XCOM, the pistols are non-accurate in that fucking game.
That's pretty good, yeah.
And they're not exactly useful for combat. So, Aljosa, as usual, useless to me in gameplay. Had to hack a lot of things, and every now and then I needed him to make some clutch-ass shots to kill some people with the pistol, because, I needed him to do cleanup. So, Aljosa is responsible for the death of Raven Simone. So, if you're a That's So Raven fan, blame Aljosa. He almost lost me Yukiko Amiga. I did not plan on having Yukiko in my game. I just got a Japanese woman named Yukiko Suzuki, and I was like, she's not going to be a Suzuki anymore.
Amagi?
Yeah. Isn't it an Amiga? It's A-M-I...
Amagi.
Oh, what the fuck ever. Fucking
It's like you don't really care about Yukiko.
It's like I don't really care, right? Come on. I'm sorry for pronouncing it the way it should be pronounced. Anyway.
Wow, Ben, he just corrected you on Japanese pronunciation.
Yeah, like, fuck you. Anyway, so what ended up happening...
Never forget the name of Sakanakachie.
You are such a scumbag. You are a maximum scumbag.
Wow.
So what ended up happening is that when you send this covert op, it's like sending a Pokemon to the fucking daycare dude. He actually leveled up. And it got to a point where Aljosa became a reliable sniper for me. Because he got so many upgrades, I was like, alright, I guess I have to use him now. Which sucked a little bit, because early on in that game, I was just going, fuck it, let me send Aljosa forward. If he dies, I don't give a fuck. Oh, actually make me laugh in this game. And he kept surviving, like, just unsurvivable scenarios.
He was the bad penny, man.
Yeah, he's the bad penny you couldn't get rid of. But, like, people I was trying to keep alive were, like, going... I lost Keith David at one point. You know how much that sucks?
Right,
I love gargoyles as a kid. I actually like his character in Mass Effect. It's pretty rad.
So here's the key question, I guess.
What?
Can't believe Aljosa lived.
So Enemy Within's great, it sounds like.
Enemy Within is great. It's absolutely worth playing.
So are you still up for more XCOM in a week?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding?
Awesome.
Is that a joke?
My
Gagan
game
is a
plan.
strategy game fiend, so that's not.
Yeah. My game plan with XCOM 2 is I might go full douchebag and actually do Iron Man mode from the get-go.
Oh,
But I'll make it like our stream game for the year.
You're gonna lose that campaign.
Yeah, that campaign's gonna be rough.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited. Oh no, so I still have.
Who on the endless backlog squad dies first? Aljosa will live. Clearly.
Iron Man Classic or Iron Man Normal?
Iron Man. I might go Classic.
Oh my god.
Classics for the vets. You gotta go. So I've been playing a lot of my games on hard lately, just because.
Apparently.
It's the only way I can feel anymore. Anyway.
Oh my god, he's like a heroin addict that has all his veins collapsed, and he needs to take
it's funny. Level. I bring this up because like I did promise Chris we would do the cold open, so he knows that it's wiki page. I don't even know why. Because we're just gonna listen to it. But I was playing XCOM. I didn't even know Matthew and Brian Markheim are in a call with me. Anyone that knows Brian Markheim, when he gets on a pun roll. There's no stopping that, man. There was a day him and William just made rock puns for what felt like an hour.
Worst day.
It was amazing.
It was actually pretty fucking funny. So Brian just got so into the fan fiction of McDucky Swag, and I gave McDucky Swag a first name. He's a Bruce, and Brian came up with all these fucking slogans for the guy. He's got Bruce is loose. He's like, I'm not about getting lucky. Cock's gun. I'm about getting ducky.
Oh my god.
He was too good.
I'm so sad I was not there.
It was pretty great.
I recorded that footage. Something from that will be a cold open to one of our podcasts. I'm not necessarily sure of this one, but I do plan on making it because there's so much cold open material of just him saying dumb shit like that.
Year.
Yes.
Did you record the rock one? Because that was good.
No, but that was during our Metal Gear Solid 5 playthrough, so I want to argue that of the 30 videos I have up, if it hasn't shown up yet, it will show up at one point.
It was too good.
It's pretty good. Oh yeah, Enemy Within is really good. I'm excited for XCOM 2. I'm gonna make that the Twitch game when it comes out. I don't necessarily. I'm not going to commit to like a full-on playthrough of it because I might get burnt out just doing it back to back. You know?
Yep.
Because I was feeling the fatigue by the end of Enemy Within. But it didn't help because I was on Iron Man, so everything was really conservative. And I actually didn't do the first string of objectives until I was like a few months into the game. Because I specifically worked my way to the mission on the fishing town. Which, fuck that mission. Because the bonus for that mission is you drop 2 panic, right? For the entire XCOM unit, which panic becomes a big issue on Challenge on Iron Man. Like, regardless if you're launching satellites. And you don't get enough money on Classic, which is weird, because you would think aliens are invading, I would have a blank check, but whatever. They gotta make a game. Understand
video game logic.
Yeah, I was like, understand that's video game logic. I understand why it's the way in the game. It's, that's how you create the metagame. Or else the game would just be easy. If you could just make everything, you just fucking wreck fools. But, that stuff was cool. I don't know, I wish that maybe they came up with like a resources mechanic instead of money, but whatever. That's XCOM. XCOM 2's rad. The only other thing I played was Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah. Number 10 game of the year.
The number 10 game of the year. I am not far enough in it to actually make any, like, sweeping, like, critiques or praise of the game. I will say that it looks really pretty. It's a very well-produced game visually. The only thing I would say is it's not as optimized as it should be as a PC port. It is a good port. It is, there's this weird frame skip that happens during cutscenes and then during some of the gameplay where if you have the high textures on, like the very high textures on, it'll do a frame skip, which is like it's this jarring thing where it looks like your game froze. Right. And then like, the next 10 seconds of the scene start to happen, and you're just like, what the fuck? That's a little weird. Otherwise, I've been able to turn that game maxed out, and I get mostly 60 frames, with like, there are occasional dips when the game gets a little crazy, which, considering I'm at a 1080p and that's a brand spanking new game, and the 970 isn't necessarily the 980 Ti. It's actually a really good port in that regard. It's just, it could be better optimized all around. It fails the tutorial test. The opening of that game is fucking awful. If it wasn't for the fact that I played the 2013 reboot, I would say that, I was able to at least brace myself for the idea that the opening is going to be bad. So right now, Crystal Dynamics has confirmed they're never going to be good at openings. I'm making that sweeping generalization right there, if these two games are any indication, right? Just because, like, they start off the game and all you do is walk with the analog stick, which I hate cinematic walking with a passion. And then you do,
Number one video game sin.
Number one video games is the worst thing to happen in video games, exactly. Of the ones gotta stay, I took Tap A to run. Anyway. And then you do, like, the platforming stuff, and then, there's, like, a set piece again. Speaking of which, I started that game on Survivor, so that's the highest difficulty in that game. Because apparently it's not as proper combat, as heavy as the last one, so, which, initially I would agree. After you get through the tutorial-y shit, you start, so Lara is searching for this, tomb, this lost city that her dad was raving on about, and he was, this well-respected, I want to say, professor or archaeologist, whatever the hell he does, fucking cares. He's rich. And he basically got painted as an insane person for saying the city existed, and now Lara's trying to find it, right? And she finds out it's in Syria, and she goes there, and she's dealing with, this scumbag organization known as Trinity, who are basically Lazarevich and his crew from Uncharted 2, except I don't think they're, warlords, they're as much as they're just scumbags, but they're armed like they're fucking warlords, I don't know. And then as you're navigating Syria, it's still tutorializing you, but you're doing a proper, what the meat and potatoes of Tomb Raider's gameplay experience is going to be, right? Mm-hmm. And initial impression is that less time is spent going shoot, shoot, bang, bang for survival, and more time is spent actually inside of a tomb or something. It almost felt like the game was called Tomb Raider. It was basic platforming stuff, nothing too complicated puzzles-wise. But, again, I prefer, as long as they're elaborate and intricate, you don't necessarily need to be difficult. But as long as it's interesting. Nothing in that first area is particularly interesting, but again, it's opening level. You're allowed to just, get that stuff started. So once you get out of that, you end up in a, I want to say the Syria, wildlands. It's like a snowed up forest. So there's a stealth sequence. I fought a bear. It was badass.
Bear's fucking scary, man.
Yeah. Did I win? Yeah, he didn't kill me, actually. He's actually a very easy fight, because, they outright tell you what's gonna happen. It's still in that obnoxious tutorial phase of... So the one thing I don't like, besides the other tutorial thing, you know how you navigate around the area and you pick up stuff like wood barks and fucking mushrooms in that game, right?
Yeah.
The game does that linear obnoxious thing where it doesn't let you pick up those items before it's ready to tutorialize that you need those mushrooms to make poison arrows. Right? To the point where they're not even on the same map that you're going to go back to get those items. Right? And nothing contextually changed to imply that mushrooms grew in the last 10 minutes. Right? And I find that is jarring. I find that lazy. I find that silly. I don't understand why it's done that way. Just, let me have my... let me figure that out. Ideally, you're implying that Lara Croft isn't an idiot. She's going to realize how to make poison arrows just going into this thing. She didn't just pick up a mushroom and think, man, I could make poison arrows. Because that's really dumb. That wouldn't even be a thing when you have a thing that shows me I can make a badass combat jacket. Because I don't understand how she knows that, but doesn't know how to make poison arrows.
She knows how to sew Gagan. She doesn't know how to make fucking poison.
Poison arrows, yes, exactly. But she can...
You can't just bash a mushroom
but
into
she
an
can
arrow
sew
with
a combat
arrow.
vest. Also, another thing of the most hilarious video game logic ever. The way you learn the way Lara Croft learns languages in this game is that she basically looks at ancient paintings, and that somehow translates into she learned more Greek.
That's That's all you need to know, man.
And I was just laughing when it was happening. I was like, this is the dumbest way because of how difficult it is to learn a language at that age in your life.
Yeah. Pictures.
No, just look at pictures. You'll get it. I was like, all right, whatever. I don't know if this is an addition, but I do hate this. So just like Uncharted, it has treasures, like random pointless collectibles that add nothing to the gameplay. Other than the fact, well, in Tomb Raider, I guess it adds something to the gameplay because it's experience points. But she has to, like, say something about that, like, treasure, that artifact. Like, I give an iota of a fuck about the Byzantine Empire or anything that is going on with something that has nothing to do with the main story at play. Right?
Just because you're uncultured swine.
It's not even
It actually does.
Whatever. The point is, it's utterly pointless so far. Like, I don't
just because you've never taken a history class in your life.
If I wanted to take a history...
I promise you that stuff has something to do with the plot. It's giving you a lot of backstory.
Okay, well,
schizophrenia.
Then it's... Okay, whatever. When we get to that point and I still go, that was utterly pointless and a waste of my time, and you didn't need to waste your goddamn voice acting on that. I'm gonna stick there. Also, they're still really bad at doing subtitles. And other than that, a lot of this has been nitpicks and stuff, but like there's just the little things I wish the games would stop fucking doing. I'm gonna say this right now. Wait, William, does the game take place in this one area, or is she gonna be globetrotting?
She moves around. There's a couple areas.
So like she's gonna go to a different country?
No.
Nope. So this one area is going to be connected in some way to that first snowy forest in some manner.
I believe so. I'm having a little bit of a hard time.
Because I was going to say there's a cave I can't enter. And I was going to say the reason why Metroid can do this is because at some point I will come back to this area, so it's perfectly acceptable that I will, get an item to open this door. That's how Metroidvania works. However, if she's gonna globetrot all the way to fucking, I don't know, the middle of the nowhere, away from Syria, that would be really stupid for me to fast travel back to Syria just so I can go into this cave. That would be silly. But apparently that doesn't happen, so that's good. I did the first tomb, and my initial reaction to the first tomb was, wait, that was the tomb? Because it gives, not a good impression. You get the fucking marker. An optional new tomb is in the area, and whatever. It does a good thing where it marks the thing on your map, and then you just hit the right stick, and there's like a blue fucking beam shooting from the sky, telling you where you need to be, and I just moved on from there. And whatever. What I was doing was basic platforming and just like solving like a physics quote-unquote puzzle. But I would argue I wasn't thinking the entire time I'm doing this. I was literally just moving forward and platforming the way I would in that area and just responding to the environment as it goes. So while some people would argue that's natural, when I think of the word puzzle, I think of a period where I stop and I think and then I do something. That's not what happened. I just literally went forward and it solved it. And then I got my box and the game's like, tomb completed, and I'm like, that wasn't a tomb. That wasn't anything resembling a tomb. So, first impressions for Rise of Tomb Raider, Crystal Dynamics is just as bad in the opening department. Not just as bad, but still bad at doing openings to a video game. But apparently the game gets a lot better. I will say the first stealth gameplay segment was fun. I liked being able to knock people out and just not have to shoot them all right off the bat. The bow and arrows, of course, classy, because bow and arrows are more badass. You escape the whole I'm going to criticize your gunplay thing by just not having guns. Think about it, developers. Think about it. Yeah, that's better. That's Rise of the Tomb Raider. Matthew, you beat the game, though.
Yep.
Would you disagree with any of my complaints so far?
Other
than
not
whatever.
really.
They don't. Yeah, I was about to say, like, they seem fair game, right? But you would agree with everyone else that game gets a lot. Everyone that has played this game says, listen, it still has that same. Like, it doesn't start strong, but once it gets going, it really hits its stride.
Yeah, mostly, yeah. There's a lot more exploring you can do this time around, a lot of extra shit you can actually do that didn't really feel like was as well developed in the first game.
Yeah.
The combat sequences are mostly good. There's a few that I didn't like a lot. 'Cause they're definitely, there's a lot more emphasis on stealth. You can do a lot more stealth like you're talking about, but there are definitely also times when you just have to shoot people.
Yeah.
And for the most part, those are good. There's one that stands out to
Yeah.
me as one I really didn't like, but for the most part, they're pretty
It would
good.
be jarring if there weren't scenarios where she has to shoot some people, but
Mhm.
yeah. I was gonna say it was interesting because, like, for the longest time, I think I have 2 hours of footage of that game recorded, and for a good time, I didn't really shoot anyone for like the longest time. Like, I didn't shoot anyone outside of the tutorial part when it wanted to teach me how to shoot dudes. And you shoot 2 people, and then you go through another stretch of just not shooting things. I was like, you know what, this is actually kind of cool. The game actually, isn't going full on bombastic the way I thought it was going to start off. So, I will say, maybe it's not as bad of an opening as the last one, but it's still not good of an opening. And I like games that start strong. So, Ben Minkoff,
Yeah.
how does The Witness start?
Speaking of, Witness starts very simply, and it walks you through a tutorial without being tutorial about it. You just open in a dark hallway, and there's a light with the door at the other end.
Light
And
with
there's
doors
a
at
little
the end.
icon that says with the left analog stick on it, kind of jiggling around, and that's it.
John Blow, what a beast.
What a beast!
What a beast.
And there is a game with puzzles that make you stop and think.
Yeah, that's not surprising in the slightest. Well, that game has to do it more often than Tomb Raider. Like,
It does it all the time.
yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. Witness was like crazy on my mind pretty much through I got it on Tuesday and
You beat
I
it.
beat it on Sunday.
Yeah.
But it
How
took a
many
lot of
hours-
time and a lot of mental energy.
How many hours did you end up having in that game once you beat it?
Not quite as many as I thought. There's still I have 23 on it right now. There's still a lot left undone.
That's still long for a puzzle game, though. Braid is a
Braid
quarter of
is
that.
Like 6
Braid
or
is
8
like-
tops.
Braid is like 20% of that, or it's like I thought it was like 4 or 5.
4 or 5
Maybe.
hours. I was gonna say, yeah, like a quarter of that.
Yeah, for Braid.
I'm
Counting
stupider
20.
than you guys. Give me a second.
It's okay. Chris.
And I think some of that went faster because I spent some time away from the game.
Yeah. Well, that's how puzzle games
But,
work, right?
Yeah,
Like, you
that's
hit
how puzzle
a
games work.
you hit a brick wall. You walk away from you get tunnel vision. You're gonna do the stupid thing where you're gonna keep trying to solve it the exact same way you've been trying to
Exactly.
solve it, even though you shouldn't be using the same solution because it clearly
It's
doesn't
got to
work.
be this way. There's just something.
Yeah,
If I move the line left instead of right, no.
yeah. And
Then
then
you just gotta stop,
walk away and then
just
you
gotta-
come back.
escape,
Look up a
quit the
guide.
game,
Look up a guy.
go to YouTube. No.
Chris, the guy
don't look
that
up a
wrote
guide.
that review,
But,
made me
yeah.
want to look up guides on the internet. And it's
Too many goddamn puzzles.
So yeah, I mean, The Witness is basically, it's a based on a very simple puzzle concept
Mm-hmm.
where you go up to these panels
Mm-hmm.
and there's this sort of
Line puzzle.
circular element at one end, and there's a little bit sticking out at the other, and you draw a line from the circular part to the part at the end
Tells
and
me that John
in a
Blow
certain
really
shape.
loved doing the maze puzzles when he was in school.
on a grid,
Mm-hmm.
based on what's there, and you solve puzzles that way.
Mm-hmm.
And this very simple idea gets elaborated on as you
It's a
the first
classic,
area
yeah,
introduces you the simplest way elements of this. It's just like,
right.
this is a maze. You go to the end. There's can be multiple entrances. There can be multiple exits, and then you get out into the world, and you can go just about anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain different main areas that each kind of introduce simple rules.
Yeah.
You encounter some sort of tutorial panels early on that don't unlock anything,
Right.
but the progression of the panels teaches you certain things about what certain symbols on the grid can mean for
Right.
what you have to do to solve the puzzle.
Right.
And then you take those rules and you go somewhere else and you can solve the puzzles, and you might run to a new rule and you have to learn how to apply that. And you just kind of keep going with that. And it's kind of puzzles all the way down in a way. There's puzzles, and then there are sometimes there's puzzles that open to secrets, and the secrets often lead to more puzzles, or they are themselves puzzles. There are a few kind of collectible things. There are some audio logs, and there are some other things that are collectible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really a game about about enjoying the act of discovery, figuring out these rules, figuring out how to deal with these puzzles.
Yeah. It's game design in a very classic sense. It's like very much the thing that make modern, not even modern, it's very much the thing that makes Mario games excellent. It's like the most basic idea of those games has been they introduce a simple idea, like a mechanic or a system or a platforming concept, and then by either the end of the world or even the end of the level, they've done something more elaborate with that idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like ever since Mario Galaxy, that's effectively been their puzzle design outright, because like they've taken mechanics away from Mario and focused more on the level design.
And really the key kind of emotional moment for the witness that it gets right on is coming up against something that you haven't quite seen before or is different from what you expect.
Yeah.
And having to stop and think about it and experiment, and then eventually having that aha moment where it all clicks.
Yeah. So I haven't actually like full on my own playthrough of the game, like start to finish, started it yet.
Yeah.
My friend actually, because he knew I was excited for the game, ended up buying it for his PS4, and I was, I want to say it was like a Wednesday. I was hanging out just watching him play because it was over, and every day, like when he'd get stuck, I'd chime in or like take over the controls for a bit, and I felt personally sometimes he would run into a puzzle where it felt like it was in his best interest to maybe humor the idea that wasn't the puzzle he should be doing right now. Like there's a rule, there's a piece of information he hasn't learned. It's actually on a different part of the island.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt, because it really did feel like one of the puzzles. It was after I went and did a different puzzle. I was like, I suddenly get what to do on that last puzzle we were just stuck on.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that is interesting to me. Right.
Yeah.
Because it does sort of put all this onus of difficulty on the player to they need to differentiate between when they're stuck mentally or when they're missing a piece of information. That information is somewhere else in the thing, right?
Yeah, and
Like
there
that-
actually there actually are some ways of like kind of figuring out where to find what you don't know as you go. But I mean, most of it
that
is
marker thingy.
not exactly.
Yeah, let's say no, that doesn't really do that.
No, there's something else. There's kind of a map somewhere.
No, right.
But so like there are kind of things you can do, but sometimes I mean, if you're stuck either way, it makes sense to walk away.
Yeah.
Just
what do you think of the story stuff in the game? Like
so I
dialogues?
got further into that. I've seen a lot of it. I wouldn't say I've seen all of it. Like the audio logs, like there were a bunch of them that were like I had passed and just hadn't noticed because they're small,
right?
Which is good. I mean, it's kind of like okay that like a lot of the stuff you can miss. A lot of the game is about observation, paying attention to your surroundings.
Yeah.
Encouraging you to kind of like take a step back and.
It almost
pay
sounds like
attention.
the worst game to play while you're in a Skype call.
It's not a great Skype call game.
No.
And yeah, kind of like there's a
Gagan
run
is
button.
very upset about this.
I was like, that's a lot of my gaming time is just being in a Skype call with people. I don't know. The Witcher 3 have behaved and not. Yeah.
Like there's a run button, but
Yeah.
you shouldn't use it all the time because sometimes just like going a little slower is going to show you something you didn't see.
Yeah.
But the content themselves.
Sorry. No, this transcends all questions about The Witness, so I apologize for cutting you off. But The Witness is a first-person video game.
Yes.
Believe you know where I'm going with this.
Oh boy.
I know where he's going with it.
When you look down, did he have legs and feet?
He doesn't have legs and feet, but he
God
casts.
damn it! Are you serious, John Blow?
But
He has a
he
shadow.
casts a shadow.
Yes. Listen, I played on the PS4, so I already knew that answer. But I was thinking, alright, whatever. PC has field of view, so, PC can render these things.
It would be kind of weird if he had a physical presence, because that's like what's going on when that line's being traced. Should there be like a hand out in front of you, like going across the screen? Like that'd be stupid. So, You don't really want
This
that.
is a very personal failure for Gagan.
Are you saying that John Blow has presented a video game that questions my belief that first-person games should have the character with limbs?
I think The Shadow is a good compromise.
We'll see. I'm sure the game is fantastic.
That's what I think.
Carry on.
But yeah, I think for the audio logs and the other story elements in the game, or story as it were, there's not that much of a plot here.
Right.
But it's a lot more a philosophy almost.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Blow he kind of listened to you. There's not a lot of his writing in it. There's a lot of other people's writing.
Time out. Oh, okay. I was going to say there's not a lot of he adjusted his writing by hitting up thesaurus.
So it's not a lot of things written by him, but quotes taken from all over the place, and
right.
It
seems like it's more introspection heavy than it is like an out. I mean, not that Braid wasn't introspection heavy either.
Braid was very introspective.
Yeah, but like it was very much tied to this one thing. Like the idea, the theme, Tim and the princess aren't necessarily the plot outright, but that theme of obsession is carried over not just through the different historical events he alludes to, but also at the end when you find out that the princess is trying to get the fuck away from Tim because Tim's a bit of a creep. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So. And there are some elements of that, of like obsession, I guess, in the island, but it's also just a lot about, about both like the act of like gaining knowledge and learning about the world, and also the act of living in the world and how best to do that. Yeah. And to cope with the idea of knowing things and not knowing things, where one should stand. Yeah. And I some of it, I'm sure some people will see as remarkably pretentious. There's a part,
John Blow game pretentious,
which I mean, shocking. Yeah. For me, I'm pretty open to it, and it all made a certain kind of sense, even at its strangest.
Right. Because Ben's pretentious too.
Because I'm all about that stuff. I mean,
dissension, man.
There's a thing at the very end of the game when you know the secret reason for Jonathan Blow's pee jug. You'll be ashamed of your words and deeds.
Nice. He Kojima's it. That's awesome.
So, I'm going to warn you straight up. It's something.
You say this like Braid isn't one of my favorite games. So.
Oh, no, that Braid's great.
Yeah, but I mean,
Braid can't prepare you for this.
So Ben, I have to ask you the tough question here. Mm-hmm. Having finished Braid and having finished The Witness, what game do you like better?
Oh, it's hard.
I said I was going to ask you a tough question, man.
It is a tough question. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
A yes or no would suffice.
If someone put a gun to your head,
Braid or The Witness, my answer is yes.
Perfect.
All right, maybe not. Okay, if someone put a gun to your head...
Time out before he answers. Like, let him have a few minutes.
It's hard to compare.
It is a recency bias.
Braid is a smaller thing. It's 2D. In some ways, that makes it tighter. Yeah. There's kind of... Like, there's that moment with the plot at the end of Braid that, like...
is transcendent.
And it's a kind of marriage of, narrative and gameplay
mechanics,
that The Witness doesn't ever really go for in the same kind of way. But The Witness is much more purely about the play in itself, and it does so much with the mechanics, and the world is so intensely designed.
Yeah, but it could be satisfying way. It could still be the Portal 2 to Braid's Portal.
And it's just not really... I don't think that's a really fitting comparison.
No, you only don't like that comparison because you think Portal 2 is like the significantly inferior game to Portal.
It's not significantly
they're
inferior.
Both really fucking awesome games.
They're both really fucking awesome. They just like... Portal 2 made different kinds of trade-offs in being bigger than The Witness did. And like as a puzzle game, I think The Witness is a better thing. I mean, there's so much content.
As puzzle games, both.
Like when people asked about like the price point of this game, it's like, and there's no question it's worth the $40 I spent on it.
Of course, that was just dumb. There's whatever. I get preachy about this all the time. There's
and,
a weird hate
against
against puzzle games.
Yeah. And the other thing with it, like, just like in terms of the size, is like very little of it is wasted.
Yeah.
Which I think, is a really important thing
Metal
for
Gear
me.
Solid 5 has a lot of wasted space in that open
Metal
world.
Gear Solid 5 has a lot of wasted space. Or, like, for example, before I was playing The Witness, I had been playing Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky.
Yeah.
Which is a
JRPG.
huge-ass JRPG.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of things I like about what I played of that game.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the middle of Chapter 1 when I stopped playing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a prologue, and then there's Chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of content in that game, and one of the cool things that they do in that game is, like, after every kind of story beat, everyone in the town kind of moves around, gets new dialogue, shifts, so the city feels very alive. Mm-hmm. All the towns and the townspeople and the characters, they're, like, going through their lives, not just, like, a person standing there saying, "Welcome to town."
Right.
They're going through, they're doing their own thing, which is awesome. But the battle system is so slow and it's so mindless. And I'm just doing the same thing over and over. I fight the same enemy and I can beat them without really taking damage if I
almost
plan
forgot
things right.
that this is a conversation about The Witness. Get to the part where the open world sucks. I don't want to know about this JRPG.
So it's just like, it's wasting my time with those battles. That's empty space.
Yeah.
So I play it for like 10 hours.
Wait, time out. In the case of that game,
like doing that.
I was gonna say, in the case of that game, you know how, like, I wouldn't argue there's quote unquote wasted space in The Witcher 3's world, but it's wasted space in the sense that, well, yeah, you're making a setting. There would be an entire area of this. Why the fuck would there be something here, right?
Like,
but you're making a proper
space, but it's more like the actions I'm taking don't mean anything.
Oh, okay.
I'm spending all this time in these fights that aren't challenging me and take a bunch of time.
And that game isn't really about soaking in atmosphere the same way?
I'm not really soaking in atmosphere during these fights.
Oh, okay. Well,
soaking in atmosphere. When I'm in the towns, it's great. I love it.
But even in the open fields, or?
The open fields aren't particularly atmospheric.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a PSP game. They don't look that good.
Oh, fuck that.
And it's, just like paths and monsters, more or less.
That's less interesting.
I think it's an interesting game. It's just like not, like, I don't like that it's
interesting
in that way.
Like, the actual use of the term, or interesting in the endless backlog use of the word?
There are things about it I like, and there are things about it I don't like that turn me off enough.
So the endless backlog definition of interesting.
But The Witness doesn't waste my time, even though it has like 600 puzzles.
Oh, The Witness is better than the endless backlog definition of interesting. It sounds like the endless backlog definition of the word fucking
The Witness
great.
is fascinating.
Fascinating.
It really like drew me in a way that I just kept thinking about it when I was away from it. Like, I get stuck on a puzzle, I'd go to bed, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd look at it, I'd get to the puzzle, and I'd solve it, and I'd cut to another puzzle, and I'd have to go to work. And at work, I'd be going through the puzzle in my head. There's this one puzzle where I was at work, and I just suddenly like stopped, and I grabbed a Post-it note, and I just started drawing out dots on the paper.
Oh, you are a scumbag. That's awesome.
And I solved it on that.
Oh, did you take notes for the game? Wait, actually,
yeah.
time out. Did you take notes for the game?
I took some notes sometimes.
Yeah. You played Fez, right?
I played Fez. Fez I also took notes with.
Well,
Fez,
Fez, you absolutely have to take notes. It's possible to play that game and not play it.
This is different from Fez.
Yeah,
I think what kind of bothered me with Fez is like most of the game is just like this platformy thing, and then it's just discovering this other weird game hidden.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily the cleanest and most enjoyable thing. I just think it's cool that Fez does.
It's cool, and it's cool that someone went that far.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't want to play
much
another
more
game that way.
cleanly tied into itself.
Yeah.
Even when I'm taking notes, it's like it's because of the rules that I learned.
How do you feel about the panel puzzles playing in this larger puzzle with the island?
It works pretty well. There are some sets of puzzles that like could kind of exist on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of puzzles that play off the environment in small ways.
Yeah.
And so like those puzzles kind of need the world to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some secrets to the world itself that just like exploring and being places, like being on the island adds to those secrets.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being able to kind of physically walk away from a puzzle within the context of the world, I think just is a useful thing.
It gives you something to do as opposed to like full on just turning the game off. and going away.
It's like if there was just like a application where there's like 12 different puzzle tracks or something, and they're all unlocked, but you just like move forward along them. And I got stuck on one. I don't know if like I could move away from it the same kind of way.
Yeah,
there's sort of a freedom to just like being in the 3D space.
Yeah. That's awesome. It sounds legit. Sounds legit as fuck. Patrick.
Yeah, I don't
Klepek.
want to go too much like the mechanics in particular, but like yeah, it's just there were all these like great surprises in the game.
Well, yeah, don't spoil it.
Yeah, so I look forward to you playing it. I want to discuss it with people. It's a ton of fun.
So there was a thing.
I find it fun, at least.
All right.
Like stuck on puzzles. So yeah.
Stop talking about it, Ben. Good God.
I can't. It's so good.
Anyway, speaking of which, by the way, we will have a question section. But never mind. We'll skip to that in a sec. I was gonna say, I lost my train of thought now. Patrick Klepek put up a video. By the way, this is starting to turn down to Patrick Klepek is going to be a full-on YouTuber, even though he saw Kotaku, it seems like, because he did I guess like his journalism thing, but like in a YouTube video, and he was on The Witness and John Blow's reaction to that game being pirated so much, right? And Patrick took it as a time to like just sort of be at a torrent site and like read the comment section of a piracy website and like the nature of piracy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like the theory is that, you know, you can't look at a pirated game as lost sales because you don't know if that person was going to buy that game anyway.
Not every pirate is a lost sale.
Right. And I would argue that can't be as black and white as, well, you know, they weren't going to get those sales anyway. I was like, no, not every pirate is a lost sale, but if 10% of them is a lost sale, that's a lot of fucking people not buying your game.
Right.
Especially in the case of big games. And in general, it's just a basic idea. Like, you put all this work and money into it, and someone's taking it for free. There's no nice way to put this.
It's gotta be frustrating.
Understand that we're the website that is going to have a game of the month and or for Game Club, and then my only solution will be to pirate that game. But understand that if the alternative was just full on, we can't pirate, I would never be against that because I am pro developers making their money. Like, I think they absolutely deserve their money. I think the only good thing about piracy happens to be the fact that at least someone is preserving the history of this medium. Because game publishers have done a shitty job with that.
So what did Patrick say in his article?
He didn't really say a lot. He went broad strokes with the video. I felt like that's my problem with it, I guess, as a video. He didn't really share his own opinion. He just presented ideas about, here's how many people, you know, well, let's contextualize John Blow's reactions. Like, hey, it sounded like The Witness was getting pirated a lot, but it's, you know, whatever today is, when he posted that video. I want to say he posted it Monday. Actually, he might have posted it today, so I guess Tuesday. So I guess it is today on a Tuesday. And he's going, well, now it's no longer the number one pirated game. It's actually right. So Tomb Raider on PC, and The Witness already had, like, I want to say 27,000 torrents, and Rise of Tomb Raider, it's only been a few days since it came out on PC, or like a week. It was only, it was already at 25,000, 26,000, which either way is a pretty big number for both games, I feel. Which makes whatever sense, but still.
It's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, it's a good chunk of change. He did the math. If those people bought the game at $40, that's $1 million in revenue his game didn't get. And last I checked, $1 million is a lot of fucking money.
Especially when you're funding it yourself.
Whatever. He has a team this time in like an actual studio. But like, hold on. When you're taking your own life savings from a big hit indie game, which is what Braid was,
and plowing all of that back into
the way back into The Witness, which seems just as obsessive of a creation as Braid was, apparently. It's like, you know, it's like pretty legit. And in the case of Blow's games, they're not easy games, so they have. I would feel like if there were ever indie games built to not succeed, you would think they would be John Blow games, because they're not as pick up and play friendly as you would think. Because they're
fortunately, he released sales numbers recently.
Yeah, the game did fantastic.
And it's doing great. It's doing even better than Braid did.
Which is fantastic.
So far.
But like the general idea was like piracy culture and stuff like that. And you would see comment sections like, oh man, I miss these type of games. I'm so glad this exists. And even Patrick Swan's like, yeah, I bet these type of games would exist more if you just bought it and not pirated the game, you know? And there were like people actually telling other people like, hey, you shouldn't pirate this game. And it's like, you're on a pirate website in the comment section. What do you think these people were going to do? Buy the game afterwards?
They're the moral pirate police.
Yeah, I guess. Like, they're the moral the moral police on a piracy website. And then Patrick ends the video with, some people might eventually feel bad and buy the game, and some people will buy it on a sale, and some people will try it on a pirated version and then play the game because demos didn't exist. Right? That all makes sense. But he's like, let's be honest. Majority of them won't. And people get all upset that John Blow dares to be angry that piracy is hurting his game or his bottom line. It's like, yeah, because that's money he's earned. It's always been a weird concept, and I think
I think that tweet in particular was just something that people read a lot into because it's Twitter and you just have space to do that.
Yeah.
That's like, because he said that, it's like...
To me, it's just a stupid concept of... To me, it's no different than when professional athletes hold out for more money and you get the people going, teachers don't make as much as this player. It's like, first of all, teachers don't have the physical abilities and the demand that this person has for their money. Second of all, if the market dictates that this person is worth that much money, who in the fuck undersells themselves? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you want to get yourself as much money as humanly possible. Like, last I checked, taxes are still a thing. You still pay your own bills. And if you're a professional athlete, that money is not always, in the case of the NFL, it's not 100% guaranteed, right? And it's
not always going to be there either.
It's not always going to be there. We've gotten to a point where, like, players at very young age are leaving the game because they're just not going to take those injuries anymore, right? And whatever, they can do that when they're more financially secure players, whereas the other players, they might not even be in the league for another 3 years. A devastating injury could have. They can become paralyzed, which is a real risk when you play in the NFL, right? To me, it's the same thing with John Blow's game. They're getting mad at him because, he's made all this other money. Why does he care if he lost $1 million? Because $1 million is still a lot of money. Like, it's still money that you, in theory, not even theory, you earn
Maybe
that.
to you riffraff down there in the peasant seats.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's still absolutely an important thing. Like, I did my work. I want to be compensated for my creation, right?
And for me, like, he wasn't even flipping out. It was just like, people are pirating the game a lot.
Well, it was
if people don't buy the game, I can't make more games.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. It's almost
like if you ask those same people, hey, how would you feel if someone just, like, didn't buy any of the stuff that you made and you lost $1 million?
I would be offended a little bit if someone pirated Chris's book. I'd be like, really? You're a piece of shit.
I wouldn't care.
I mean, Chris wouldn't care, but I would care for Chris.
We would care on your behalf.
As long as people are reading it.
I mean, if it's something if it's something he really didn't want to happen, he wanted to put out a DRM-free version of the game on day one.
Nah, that's true.
So,
I don't know. I like
it's like, he knows it's something that's going to happen. It's
funny.
Just sucks.
It's funny, though, because Patrick also points out in the video how outspoken John Blow is, and I feel like of the developers who actually help, like, give me a higher appreciation of their product after I hear something from them, John Blow's on that short list. Sometimes you hear a developer explain what they were going for, and then you play the game, and you're like, the fuck, you were going for that, and this is what you came up with? Right? Like, especially if they're talking about the story in their game. But, like, in that video, John Blow is
authors talk about how bad video game stories are, and then they write a video game.
Yeah, no, actually, that.
Chris, don't be that guy.
Yeah, who was the guy? The Crysis 2 guy, right? Like, I remember him bad-mouthing all those... Like, whatever, Halo has a bad story. It's not a lie that he said it, and he is a more accomplished author. But then he wrote the script for Crysis 2, and it was pretty fucking terrible. It was somehow worse than the first Crysis game. Story-wise to boot. Anyway, I was going to say, it was just interesting to hear everything he was saying back in 2008 about how AAA doesn't demand a lot of the player, and games have gotten to a point where everything's an easy button, win now button type deal. Like, we're afraid to challenge players. And it brought me back to when he was in, what was that movie called? Indie Game the Movie, right? Like, I think he made a great point in saying that AAA games focus too much about rounding out the rough edges. And I think William always makes this point when he needs to have his Valve hate session, is that they focus test the fun out of their games, right?
It's true. Like,
we assume, and it goes back to, like, a lot of great things from Shinji. I don't know, I'm going quote hopping right now. But Shinji Mikami, one of my favorite quotes from him is, you don't want to go look at your game and try to fix everything that your game does poorly. You want to figure out what your game does well and enhance that and keep celebrating that as part of your game, right? And that makes sense in the context of games Shinji Mikami has made. And John Blow's point is, sometimes those rough edges are what make a game special, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what's God Hand without its awful taste and humor? I think that actually adds a lot to the experience, but it makes that game also detestable to a lot of people.
Or without it being fucking hard at times.
Yeah, like
that spike right early on when that first demon shows up.
Yeah. Put it another way, people don't like the cattle herding in Red Dead Redemption. What the fuck is that ending like if you don't have the cattle herding section? It suddenly loses some impact, right?
John Blow does not like the ending of Red Dead Redemption.
He doesn't like the ending of Red Dead Redemption because of the looter narrative Disco Biscuits aspect, which I agree with. Like, it is hard to... That's always been the problem. Like, he's valid in that point, in that you're playing a game... 1,000 people, and then the game wants me to care about this one life. It's like, that's intellectually dishonest. It's like, yes, Red Dead Redemption and all these other AAA games that have always tried to do that bullshit are intellectually dishonest. Action movies have been intellectually dishonest for decades in that regard.
But if Red Dead's going to try, the cow herding is an important thing.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, the cattle herding is an important thing, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you, asshole. I don't know. I like hearing him talk. I feel like it's also made it contextualized Fez for me as well, right?
Yeah. That
story about Phil Fish was saying his dad used to make him little games where he had hidden messages from inside the game, and then I went, oh, that's a cute story for how he came up with Fez. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
that's an interesting.
It makes him seem less crazy.
He's still crazy, but I would say he
crazy.
should be given his credit for how good of a game Fez is, even if it's not like some great thing and he was a little over. Whatever. He made a sweeping generalization that Japanese games sucks. He's not the first developer to make a shitty generalization. He won't be the last one. Chris, I want to talk Life is Strange.
Of the world.
Yeah. Chris, Life is Strange.
You can wait on Life is Strange until I beat it.
I feel like we should do a spoiler cast on that one. Though.
Yeah, we can wait.
And I Phil on that one. And then Spyro 2, I feel like we should wait till William actually plays more of it. I like Spyro 2.
I've got a couple hours of it. I can give you like first impressions.
Yeah, first impressions. I mean, whatever. My Rise of the Tomb Raider stuff was all first impressions, so might as well.
Sure.
We'll get Chris's first impressions of Life is Strange.
I think it's really cool to. I guess this doesn't happen as much.
Matthew is also a part of this podcast.
More, but
I just realized there's been like large stretches without him on.
But it was interesting to me to go back and see, like, the first sequel made on the same hardware for something.
Mm-hmm.
Because Spyro 2 looks a lot better. It feels a lot nicer. Like, the art is definitely improved. Like, you can look at that game and be like, wow, this is completely improved. And then the gameplay improvements, like the fact that you can hover in this one. You can't hover in the original Spyro. That's a big thing. And all of a sudden it's got voice acting, which is of questionable quality, but it's there. And Spyro's voice actor is different, thank God. He was so 90s. And it's interesting to see all the improvements and like the increased focus on story, and you can actually talk to characters now. And as opposed to just collecting stuff and freeing dragons, you have to go get talismans. It's interesting to see how they improve the game by, in a lot of ways, stripping what makes the original work as a game, like in terms of what your objectives are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting. And it's interesting to see that the worlds are a little bit more segmented. I think they're smaller overall, but there's more in them, so they're more concise.
They're tighter designed.
Yeah, the design is tighter. You don't quite have to roam so much, but like the level of difference that the original has is still there. So it's one of those games that I can kind of look at just initially and be like, okay, this is how you make a sequel, because they're tossing out the stuff that doesn't work and focusing on new things, improving old things. When they realize that the stuff that they used last time doesn't work anymore, they replace it with something else. It's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you're not going to do, I don't know, sometimes I want sequels to take more, like, braver risks, but, like, if you're going to do it the right way, I guess it isn't just literally make the same game as last time, as much as take the things your game did well last time, Give me more of that, and give me way the fuck less of the things you were doing terrible.
Yeah, you can swim in this game. Oh my god, swimming was a revelation. You can swim.
That was the revelation of the 90s, man. You could go in the water in video games.
Right? Like, oh my god, you could swim, and
it wasn't just a swimming level. You could go in the water now.
Yeah, and you can fly without being in the shitty-ass flying levels in the original Spyro.
Yeah.
Yep.
Flying levels are still pretty bad today.
God, I haven't played Spyro in forever.
Yeah,
It's a cool game, but
awesome.
Spyro 2 is... Initially, I wasn't like quite so sold on it, because it was like, let me talk about this cutscene and where you're going, and it's like, I don't care. I just want to collect dragons. Then it was like, there are no dragons. Collect talismans. And I was like, I don't know about this, Spyro. And then I played it for another hour, and I was like, nope, this is good. All right, I like this game.
Williams discovering the PlayStation 1 right now.
Yep.
There's like people out there jealous of you. No, because you're getting to do the thing where someone's like, man, I wish I could just play that game fresh again.
Yeah.
For some people, Spyro 2 is that game. Not for me, but I think Spyro 2 is an awesome game, actually. I really like that game.
I love...
No, Apis game!
Yeah. I love going back and like playing old games for the first time, and I think it's like something that, I mean, especially like as an industry, we need to preserve games and like preserve the experience of those games, because those games are still important, still matter, you know.
Those games are still good.
Games are still good. Like, they have things to say in terms of design that are still useful.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it's annoying to go back to a game and be like, wow, this studio went from cool things to what the hell happened with Resistance 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Think about that for a sec. I mean, whatever. There was probably like a major difference in talents, but Ted Price, from my understanding, was around there when Spyro was a thing, so, you know, he was the one being put up on E3 stages when they were pimping Resistance to people, so.
Poor guy.
Yeah. That was a passion project with Resistance to them on some level.
That's
Sunset,
scary.
Well, at least Sunset turned out good. Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah.
Christopher, you should get first impressions of Life is Strange, though.
First impressions.
Yeah, this is
yeah, so I was excited for this game because it was fought for hard on the Game of the Year cast. It was a hard cut. It was actually one of the last cuts of the top 10.
I think it's a terrible cut.
Oops,
Funny story.
Someone had just told us that Tomb Raider had cinematic walking. Maybe things could have been different.
Well,
I offered you guys the option to cut Undertale, which, you know,
he held back.
That wasn't the right option.
That was the right option for Gagan,
The
which
right
he wishes
option-
he had taken now.
I think Undertale is not a better game than Life is Strange. Absolutely.
See,
agree with that.
I gave you guys an option.
But
man.
if Rise of the Tomb Raider is any indication, I don't think it's better than Life is Strange either. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I had a good argument, so, I mean. If we're going by the argument is the standard.
If we're going by the Tom
That
Towers...
wasn't good enough.
No, time out. So, Tom Towers, my buddy at GameUnder.net, besides the fact that Life is Strange is actually his game of the year, barring him actually switching sides, which I think is just crazy considering how he gets about stories and games, but whatever. And he's a point-and-click adventure guy, so I thought him was less likely to like this game. Wow, that was grammatically terrible. Anyway, what I was gonna say is, so I talked it up with him, I was like, alright, so hit me with it. What was like the weakest argument? What was the worst? He said, Ori and the Blind Forest came off as the weakest argument for even making the list. Because it seemed like the two people who were most passionate about it weren't really that defensive about it. And in your case, you actually criticize things about it. And in my opinion, that's unfair because I'll criticize anything in a video game. So that's an unfair standard to have against my arguments. He agreed with me that the Super Mario Maker argument was more of an advertisement than an actual argument. And I was like, thank you. Chris didn't see this. He just said, no, we argued it for so long. I'm like, I know, because Brian just said bullshit for like 10 minutes.
With full Obama.
He went like full con job, and everyone believed him. I'm like,
He
it was a good con.
overwhelmed me.
We wanted to believe in the con, Gaga.
Yeah, whatever. He's like, other than that, you know, it seemed like Until Dawn and Rise of the Tomb Raider were good arguments. You guys just didn't have a counter argument for them, so it would have been a really stupid reason to cut them for just because, you know, that, which I agreed with. I was like, if no one's got a counter, like, regardless of the fact that none of us have played the games, right? You know,
We still heard the arguments.
Yeah, you know, it was hard to have Phil give up Until Dawn when he was so vehemently against Undertale. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I'm sure that's how I'm going to feel when I play Until Dawn. It's like, that game made this list and not Life is Strange. And I'm going to be so angry about that. Because whatever, Undertale, I at least agree is so creative that it deserves to be there, and the stuff it does with mechanical storytelling. But, so, that little fact check in, yeah.
How's Life is Strange so far?
Life is Strange just tells not the most unique story in the world. I constantly get flashbacks to Donnie Darko when I'm playing this game all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily a different setting. It's a very similar setting too. It's a school, but just in video games especially, you don't see anything like this really.
Bully is like the lone exception.
Yeah, maybe, but again, the protagonists and the core characters are so different from the tone. The tone is completely different. It's a very tender game. That's the word that always comes to me. Everything feels kind of bruised while I'm playing it. Even like the soundtrack that comes in, it's got that twangy guitar that feels like it's trying to pluck it. Not overly sentimental, where it's melodramatic and trying to get emotion out of you. I just feel that it does that very naturally. I appreciate the fact that it takes its time. Like, nothing of real, maybe one or two big moments happen in the first episode, but not really. It's just kind of plot setting and character building, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that this game took its time getting into the story and the characters. There's not much to the game in terms of actual gameplay. There's some decisions here and there. There's some minor quote-unquote puzzle solving with the time mechanic. But it's more just these characters, this situation, piecing together how these relationships and how these personalities clash and what that might mean for the overarching. And every time, it's very good at giving out little tidbits of information. Every time you think, yeah, I think I'm piecing this all together, there's that extra little breadcrumb that puts a whole tangle in the web. What I like about it and don't like about it at the same time in the time play mechanic, in the sense that in every video game ever, you make a decision and you're stuck with that decision unless you shut off the game and replay it. I like how in Life is Strange you can immediately replay a decision to see how it would change.
Right.
The only thing with that is a lot of those decisions, the consequences aren't immediate. So immediately rewinding to see the other side doesn't matter.
But I think that's actually what's cool about it, is that you get an immediate reaction to give you an idea, but you don't know the long-term aspect. So like there's still meaning to making a choice, and that there's going to be a consequence you didn't see coming.
Right,
but it helps you color it. It helps you color your decision making in a different light as well.
Yeah, definitely. But I've already started to kind of hone in on the game's sense of morality, in the sense that, not always, but many of the times, the option you pick that has an immediate bad reaction, in the long term will typically have the better reaction of the two. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Skip Bayless.
What?
Never mind. You don't watch that show. Continue.
No.
You're slamming the desk.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I just feel that, again, I'm not saying that's always, I'm very near the end of the third episode. Second episode, the second half of that was an amazing, finale.
Yes.
By the way. Wow.
Oh my god, yes.
And considering I had the better of the two ways that could have gone, I would love to see the other.
Yeah, it worked out well for me as well. I like that character in general.
Yes.
Mm.
I'm very excited
for that.
The
game is so good.
The character work in that game is very, very good.
God, that fucking game should have been in our top 10. It's so bullshit.
Possibly.
That is the bullshit of this year.
Unfortunately, it came down to me cutting it too, so this will be the karma I get that I actually end up enjoying it and probably put it on my top 10 list for the year. Because unless, I know one of the biggest things was there's some reservations on the conclusion, or at least how it gets there.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
But the same thing could be said of the game that this reminds me, or the movie that this reminds me of, Donnie Darko. Is there some weird logic leaps at the end of that movie too? But it still ends up, yeah. But it still ends up being a powerful and emotional experience, regardless. And unless this game nosedives off the cliff, I just love how everything is building up. I feel, other than while still having those big emotional moments along the way. Yeah, really cool game, good characters. I look forward to see how much my decisions actually matter. I see some things already taking into place,
Right.
but I hope this isn't like a you-know-who situation, Mass Effect 3, where I get...
No, it's not that. It's because it doesn't betray the plot, I feel.
Right, it gets
just,
that binary. And
it's just, it's a different way of describing it. It's the setup for... Even if you knew what the setup was actually going to be for your final decision, you still... I wished it was something different, is what ultimately ended up happening. It's like this thing didn't bother me until the very end, and I'm like, now I don't want this here. Now I don't want this here. I don't know. I'll be able to explain it better when I know we don't.
I'll be done by the next podcast, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, forum news. Forum news. At least by the next podcast, I will have either started a Bully the Scholarship edition, because that is one of our Game of the Months, William, since you're 1/3 of our judges on the forum for this. That was an inspired pick for a Game of the Month. I felt it was inspired. That wasn't, like a vanilla pick to me.
No, that was mostly Phil. We talked about a lot of different games and, just kind of what we thought would be a switch from Ori and Super Mario Brothers, and like a unique game that maybe doesn't get as much discussion as it should get.
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up going with.
Yeah,
so that
it's
was
a really
logic
out there game for Rockstar. Like, the only thing more out there is the fact that they made table tennis.
Yeah.
The other one happens to be Grim Fandango, because that was the quote-unquote free game of PS Plus the month before. And it was close to being our Game of the Month until we went with the original Super Mario Brothers. So I will hopefully have started one of those games, so I guess that'll be the next game I talk about. But those are the two games I plan on beating that month. Gagan's 52 game challenge check-in. I am currently at 6 games beaten on the year. Go me.
ahead of the game.
Ahead of the curve
Nice.
right now. Actually, I also beat a game we didn't talk about. We don't need to. It's that Sybil game that Phil was talking about. That was interesting,
Yes.
but other than that, I didn't, whatever. It was an hour. It was an easy finish. I can't complain too much. It counts. All games count as far as I'm concerned. And then that should do it for that. I do have a few questions. So I know Angels and Demons, our buddy, watched our Game of the Year podcast. First thing I want to get into is that he said that I spoke over people. I didn't feel like I came off angry or yelling at you people, except for the part where I had to yell at Wazzy, because Wazzy was getting way too fucking frustrated.
Wazzy was being very Wazzy.
And I remember yelling at the end, because I just wanted to
it to be
And
over.
things.
yes, I want to fucking end this call, because I'm really angry right now. And I'm just agitated, and it's like, oh my god, we still have so much more to do.
Okay,
Right?
go on.
The other thing is, I was going to defend myself here, is that, we had too many people on that podcast that got unwieldy, and people were talking over each other, and I needed to direct traffic after a certain point. Because, and I understand why Wazzy got mad, the early parts of that podcast, I would argue, we were way too quick on cutting people off. And
Yes.
when we do the 2016 Game of the Year award, this is going to be as cold cut of a rule. You will shut the fuck up until the other person is done talking.
Sounds like a good rule.
Like, let them talk and get their points across. You're not going to just cut them off mid, just bring a notebook with you and a pen so you can outline, your conversation points. Because, let the person
But don't
have
write
the
a
floor.
speech. Don't write a speech.
Don't write a speech. Yes, we're going to make that a rule as well. If you come in with a speech, you're allowed to come in with a planned argument, but it better be an argument or the host will rush you. And I should have rushed Brian, which I think I did at one point. I did say, Brian, get the fuck over. So yeah, if you're...
He didn't say his whole speech. He had to skip a few
I was about to
paragraphs.
say... Because I'm sorry, I still stand by this. That was the biggest waste of our fucking listeners' time. And my time. Because it was the whole time he was saying nothing! Anyway, I'm still angry.
There were a lot of...
That
It was
one...
it was
that
too
one's the
big.
way
That
it's
whole
presented.
podcast was just too
Yeah.
big. And going
he's,
back to the
he's painting
podcast
the
from last year.
context of a thing, and so I'm saying, if I came off rude, I apologize to anyone. But I didn't feel like I was being rude. I felt like it was just got to a point where I had to direct traffic, which is what I was mostly aiming to do. Which is the unfortunate thing about being host for something like that. otherwise, I mean, we've done this podcast. We talk over each other plenty of times, and every now and then I'll yell when Ben gets going. I'm like, listen, we need to move. Like, I like the witness.
Yeah, Ben.
It's like,
Okay, sorry, I'm the only one who rambles on this podcast.
Chris. You shouldn't be saying this, Mr. Burial at Sea.
How long do we talk about your 2 hours of Tomb Raider?
I know, probably the 2 hours it took me to do Tomb Raider. That's how we had the war. I felt like there was a really short-ass game we talked about way longer than the game was. Was it her story? No.
Oh, you mean in the podcasts? In the Game of the Year cast?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, there was probably something. Anyway, so that's that. But he did ask us a question on the second page. Not a question literally, but it was... So he said, no surprises here except at how fast you reach consensus on the top 3 as compared to last year. Pretty simple on that. It was getting really late, and we had been in the same spot for a long while, and I was just quicker to concede on The Witcher 3, because I was just like, alright, fuck it, I want to be done with this now. So, I want you to know that we're the website that will argue for video games for 5 hours, but then at the end realize that it's completely arbitrary and bullshit. So, there you go.
Give right up.
It's like, listen, our integrity is there, but it's not completely there. I just think that most already agree with what the pros and cons are to those games you've chosen, which is true. However, it seems like the addictive fun factor is what keeps Rocket League in so many of these discussions, much like Hearthstone last year, in a way that it remains an outlier that makes me question what is the one constant criteria that the best game of the year has to offer. And I would say, there really isn't a criteria for the best game other than whatever your goals are, you better have nailed them. You know? Because I feel like games have gotten so complicated that it's not as... And they're so varied. Like, what can be our best criteria, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I've grown to feel about games as I played more of them.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I know I used to, like, think at one time, for example, like, games don't need cutscenes. Like, that used to be a thing I thought. And I was like, you should always stay in the gameplay. Nothing should ever interrupt that.
I still think that.
We know.
Well, I think it's awesome when you can pull that off.
Yeah.
But, like, and I like a lot of games like that. But, every game, there's such a variety in video games that putting, like, a hard rule in, like, your game has to not have cutscenes.
Your game doesn't have to have cutscenes translates into The Last of Us is bad at storytelling in a game. So
your game has to have the best mechanics, or your game can't have cinematic walking. Like,
or
these hard rules.
Your game needs to have complex mechanics that aren't too simple. So, like, now suddenly Journey has bad gameplay. That's not fair. You know
like, these rules hold until they don't.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, like, what the game is trying to do and how well it achieves it, I think. Yeah.
I feel like there's individual criterias, like there will be certain things that, like, depending on whichever one of us it is, like, I would argue the chances of a technically inefficient video game ending up on a Phil top 10 list is highly
not gonna happen.
Yeah, because he values that stuff in a game. That's perfectly fine. I don't mind that. As far as, I would argue in my case, like, the chances of you ever seeing a game where I'll outright tell you the mechanics aren't good.
Not gonna happen.
That's not gonna be your number one.
That's fuck number one. It might not even make my top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Top 15. I like her story. I would not give it higher than a 6. Because I think that's just silly after a certain point. But, I think if I had a central criteria, which is one I do want to be our thing, is that, and the reason why I feel like this is a fair criteria is because I've always argued that the word gameplay isn't as specific as mechanics. It is a broader composition. It is the whole thing coming together, and more or less that even the narrative has to be a part of it on some level. The story that the game tells is part of the gameplay, right? Like, the Journey example is the perfect example of this, is that Journey mechanically is just walk forward. There's a button that lets you sort of talk to your friend. There's a jump button, right?
Yeah.
With those simple inputs, though, it tells this, like, very abstract, symbolic tale about the circle of life, and it's effective, it's potent, The game world plays a role into that. The music plays a role into that. The visual direction of the game plays a role in that. It's one of the very few games. It's in that rare breed of games where the visuals are an important part of the experience because they add something to the experience. And it's not as simple as the game looks good. It's what it conveys by looking that good, right?
Yeah.
In a different context, like, there's plenty of games that have really good mechanics, but they don't necessarily play as well as either. Max Payne 3, I would argue, yes, the shooting mechanics are superb. Rockstar's bullshit keeps getting in the way. There's way too many cutscenes. It's poorly paced. It's repetitive. It's got way too many set pieces. Fuck every time Max Payne is crying about his pathetic life when I'm doing the most badass shit in video games. Taking away the amount of guns you used to have in the old games is a step back. The part where the entire plot is that this Spanish warlord douchebag needed to find a fall guy for his crazy scheme and went to some famous cop killer in New York is just absurd. And considering how, offensively pretentious as Rockstar is, it makes that story point even more stupid. And for anyone that's bitching that I spoiled the game for you, I saved you from Rockstar's garbage. So you're welcome.
So in short, a lot of things didn't work.
Yeah, and a lot of things didn't work. But, would I ever argue those shooting mechanics? Those shooting mechanics are... That game is as close to being third-person shooter Fear as you're gonna get. Nothing else in that genre has better gunplay.
But that's not the whole game.
But that's not the whole game. There's other... Ninja Gaiden 2 should be a better game than Bayonetta if it's all about the combat mechanics. It's not. It's completely unfair. The camera is annoying. Fuck the swamp level, right?
Ultimately why Witcher 3 won over Metal Gear Solid.
Bayonetta 2, me and you have argued we think Bayonetta 1's better. Bayonetta 2's combat system is clearly better than Bayonetta. It's not even close. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different improvements they made. And then, agreed. That's what played into, while none of us would argue that The Witcher 3 has better mechanics than Metal Gear Solid 5. That's just a laughable statement, right? And I would agree that Metal Gear Solid 5 is a better game. But at the end of the day, with the way the arguments were going, and with the way that Phil and Wazzy were incapable of accepting that The Witcher 3's combat is at best okay, and that should be considered a flaw. Okay in the context of its world is excellent, its story is really good, the characters are endearing and entertaining, they're complicated, the stories, there's all these individual stories that run a wide range of emotions, from they'll make you sad, to they'll make you angry, to they're pretty funny, to they're whimsical, to they're adventurous, to all that stuff, right? It put Witcher 3 in a class of its own, right? And that's really why that won Game of the Year for a lot of... I would argue it's the same reason why a game like The Last of Us was a unanimous Game of the Year in 2013. Was that the best playing game that year mechanically? No. Was it really a better shooter than Antichamber as a puzzle game? I don't think so. Was it a better shooting game than Rayman Legends was as a platformer? I don't think so.
But it had that je ne sais quoi on the other...
But, the mechanics were good enough. The pacing was great. The storytelling with the mechanics was exceptional. You know what I'm saying? If you make...
Everything fit together.
Yeah, whereas Rayman Legends had Murphy, and Antichamber had a story that Ben thinks is completely stupid. Even if it's taken as a joke, it adds nothing. It's a bad joke, in your opinion. It's unfunny if it's not being serious. And if it's being serious, then it's just, pointless.
And I think The Last of Us is a better
in
shooter
the case
than
of
any
William, he
puzzle
looks
game.
at... Yeah, whatever. What?
I was interested
Stop.
in what Gagan thought I was looking at.
I was going to say, in
Continue.
the case of William, he's going to add in the point. It's listen, it's fantastic Antichamber does these cool things with the puzzles, but it honestly does make me dizzy with this presentation. I don't think it's as cool as some of the puzzles come as a product of the presentation, the fact that the presentation does affect me on just a basic level is a fair problem. That's why Phil doesn't like Hotline Miami. That's not an unfair complaint at the same time, right?
I've heard some people have that complaint with The Witness also, with a motion...
Well, that's first-person motion sickness, right? That's...
slightly different.
But I feel like Antichamber is capable of giving you a headache, which is a full-on headache with the way that game looks. I think it's different than just straight up... some people get motion sickness from first-person games. I get that. But I feel like Hotline Miami's got that weird dizzy dream thing going on, right? And sometimes that's sensory overload. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would argue that's a hard game to marathon for me. Just because, like, my eyes get tired of it after a certain point.
And going back to the initial discussion of, like, what we value, like, as our one overriding thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the game just has to be good. It has to be good at what it wants to set out to do.
Yeah.
It has to not be, you know, wishy-washy where it's trying to include mechanics that don't matter. You know, it's the thing that you look at it at a game and you see all the things that the game could be, and then when the game gets very, very close to that or becomes that, that's a good game.
Yeah, and the reason I like aiming for as many people during those podcasts as possible is like, I want someone like Matthew there who is going to say, you know what, games can and should tell stories. Why the fuck isn't there context for why I'm doing this, right? I'm not a story person in games, but I know Matthew is. I know he gives that much of it. I know it bothered him that Metal Gear Solid 5 wasn't as stupid as it usually is.
Yeah. That is, yeah.
You know?
I like that sort of thing in that game.
Criteria?
For like what I consider to be like a great game, or
like what do you think your constant would be? I think we all have a constant. We don't like.
Oh yeah, I definitely do. It's definitely as you said. There's definitely almost all of my favorite games either have a focus on like storytelling in the more general sense, or like the Dark Souls, Demon Souls style, where it's all like background stuff that you can find out if you look for it. Mm-hmm. So like any sort of like storytelling thing really appeals to me. And obviously I like it when a game plays well, because I think my favorite shooter is probably Fear. So like mechanics also matter to me, but it's definitely like most of my absolute favorite games are definitely ones that like tell a story in some way that's good or unique or interesting. Usually character driven is my favorite too. Yeah. Like The Last of Us.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably about it.
So if that makes you feel annoyed that we don't have like a clear-cut black and white best game criteria, I guess we apologize, but I you know, it's gotten to a point where you just get so many games that are so unique sometimes that it's like, how do you begin? Like, I felt like Journey was so different to critique from anything else.
Yeah, well, like, what is the standard that you're going to apply to that you
Spec
can apply
Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line is literally, I feel like, does make me question certain things about how I judge games. Like, I would still argue... Like, it still bothers me that the game is very much, we're going to criticize crap shooters and it's a crap shooter. Like, I don't care what the two of you say. Like, to me, it is an unimpressive, dull shooter. But as you two would point out, it's like, that's an important part of the experience. So that experience is that how monotonous and how mind-numbing it all gets enhances what they're trying to convey. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It's just more complicated. And that's a good thing, I would argue. It is a good thing that they're complicated. I feel like it made sense in the 90s to judge games on a purely mechanical level because they rarely did anything more than the mechanics. You know? Early 90s, like especially the SNES era. You know? Like, who cares if you could tell a better story than Mega Man X? Mega Man X played better than you.
Right.
Like, significantly better. Anyway. Last one. From Chaz, our buddy Premith.
Okay.
Actually got one. Two. I'm going to save his next one for next week.
2 questions, 1 episode.
No, maybe. I don't know. The first one was, how much do you guys value backwards compatibility in your consoles and handhelds? Matthew.
I'm going to be honest. It's a thing called emulation on the PC, so it doesn't really matter to me much anymore.
Glad you're honest about that. Christopher Compton.
Backwards compatibility. I have gotten to the point, honestly, where my backlog is too large, and it's sad, but I just can't afford time or money to go back anymore. Like, I know, for me, it's not the same. You go revisit your favorite movies over and over again because it's 2 hours of your life.
Revisiting a game is so much harder because of the time.
It's a huge deal. What am I going to do? Persona 4 is one of my favorite games. I'm just going to boot that up and
it's 80 hours. Yeah, it's
like,
easy to do it with Super Metroid because it's not that long, but
so
a lot harder.
It's
Witcher
sad.
3, you're never going to go back to that, though,
No,
huh?
I am going to go back to that,
Okay,
just because the 2 DLCs will, like...
No, I mean, like, full-on start to finish go back.
Yep, no, I will for that one.
Okay.
But that's because I have it on my PC, so it's available to me. Here's the thing. Backwards compatibility, I think it's great if it's available. I'm not the type of person that says, oh, my Xbox or my PS4 doesn't have backwards compatibility. What a shit system. Like, I don't care.
William?
I've gotten to that point where I don't care.
I think I probably care about it more than most of the people here, just because Like we've talked about, like I like to go back and play older games that I haven't
You also
played.
collect more of your games.
Yeah, and I'm a collector too. I like having, physical copies, collector's editions of stuff that I really like. I don't buy a lot of collector's editions anymore, but I like having physical copies of PS1 games, stuff like that. So to me, it's really important. I like it when a company takes the time to put that into their console. It's not cheap, it's not easy, but I think it's also an important thing for like preservation of games, which we're really bad at. And the more games are, even if like backwards compatibility is, the PS1 can play, or the PS3 can play PS1 games that you can buy off the PlayStation Store, then we're closer to preserving those games, and that's important. So it's important to me. It would never put me off from buying a console. Like I don't look at the PS4 and say I can't play PS3 games on it. It's shit. But if a system does that, I appreciate it a lot more. So it absolutely to me is something that I look at. And when a system does have it, like the Xbox One just got it, which is super exciting for me because that means I don't have to drag my 360 out whenever I want to go play something.
Ben?
Same thing.
Yeah.
I'm on William's boat right now. It's like I appreciate when it's there because I do want to go back to some of these games, especially games I missed. But
yeah, for me, it's often more a thing I appreciate than a thing I use. But I know with my PS3, I got to catch up on a lot of PS2 games with it. I got one of the last backwards compatible ones.
Yeah, Shinobi.
And that's where I played Shinobi. That's where I played God Hand. That's where I played Zone of the Enders 2. That's where I played Persona 4.
No easy games. Oh, Persona 4.
Yeah. Of course, not easy.
So
It's easier than the other three.
Yeah, true.
it's easier than the other three.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
So like having that option there gave me access to this big library of older things that I wouldn't have been able to experience otherwise.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's really awesome to have it there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wouldn't want to lose it if I don't have to.
I mean, I appreciate the emulation thing, and I do sort of agree, Matt, that sometimes I just go, well, I guess I can't buy it, might as well just go pirate it, right? But at the same time, I don't know, in an ideal world, I wish all these companies were able to find a way to get their backlog on the Steam store. Like, they should be able to just put it up in a digital format, so,
like Square seems to be doing.
Like, let the PC preserve these games outright in a safe way, so then the pirates have nothing to stand by. That's that one. His other last one was, what is, in your opinion, and this might require some thinking on you people, but I don't think it should be a thinking thing for you people. What's, in your opinion, the best instance of storytelling in a video game? Doesn't have to be well written. It just has to be something unique to this medium. Something that intrinsically couldn't have been done in any other format or medium. I guess you do need to think about this.
Bro.
I'll give you all a minute, and I'll go with the example of, whatever. It's Planescape Torment. Besides the fact that that game is exceptionally well written, it's the way that game is well written into the setting of that game that really makes it compelling in a way that doesn't always happen in RPGs, right? And I go back to that the ideal way I play that game is I make my character basically talk his way out of everything as opposed to get into combat, and that's done because you need to pay attention to your surroundings, you need to talk with all the people in like a given town or an area, so you have and like sometimes you'll take notes, so you have a general idea of like who like the big bad is effectively, so you can just go speak to him, and you know certain things about him in advance, and then you can like properly, there's some guesswork, but like it's educated guesswork at that point, right?
Makes sense.
Right.
I think it would be lost if you were watching that in cutscenes.
Right.
Or it just automatically did something. Like, the fact that you can still fuck up and then be punished with a gameplay scenario adds a lot to the experience. I mean, I think maybe certain games are better because, like, they've become more minimalistic in their approach to do a journey. But because Planescape is also pretty complex as a story, it's a very challenging story, I would argue that only enhances what Planescape did with its mechanics and its storytelling. Matthew Crandall, going to you for next. Good silence. Man. Oh, okay.
I don't know. Honestly, I still haven't entirely decided.
Are we talking about
honest.
like storytelling specifically in game or in any medium? Like
It has to be games. It has to be game. It has to, and you need to be able to explain how it only could have been done in the game.
in the game or just in video games?
In video games, it only could have been done through video games.
Like I thought you were talking about like a storytelling moment that you were still.
Oh, that is entirely unique to video games. It's probably not going to happen.
Okay.
Every one of these stories is ripped off of something.
Yeah, no problem. I was just making sure.
If nobody else feels comfortable going, I think I can talk.
Go, William.
I can go next.
So, like, to me, it comes down to, like, a number of games, but I think,
You gotta pick the best.
honestly, having not played Planescape, to me, it's...
No. I mean, like, of your group, what's the best?
Right, and that's, like, the thing that makes me want to go play that. Stuff like that. But it's probably Spec Ops to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got kind of the BioShock and Braid thing going for it, where I don't think it works without being a game. You know, BioShock works because you have the would you kindly moment. And I was just following my objectives, yeah, but you've been complicit in this story. Same thing, Braid. Well, you was just doing what the game told me to do. Yeah. And Spec Ops takes that to the nth degree of, well, I wanted to do this. I wanted to finish the game. I wanted to see what would happen. And that story is told based on, A, what you bring into it as a player of shooters, and B, what you want to get out of that experience.
And its criticism of those shooters makes even more sense in the context of, like, how it presents certain action sequences are very much like other video games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people make the mistake that it's doing the Apocalypse Now thing. But it's like, Apocalypse Now was criticizing the idea of war. This was literally criticizing war games and how they trivialized some, like, scary things about war and celebrated that stuff, right?
Right. And, you know, even to, like, the thing about games, you know, film as a medium is not capable of, look at this interface.
Yeah.
Doesn't that remind you of this? You can do a shot like that, but in Spec Ops, they can take literally the interface out of Modern Warfare 4.
Well, yeah, when they do it in film, they get the scene in Doom.
Yeah. But, you know, it doesn't work. In books, you can repeat a sentence, but it doesn't have the same as, let me take this interface out of Modern Warfare 4. Let me put it in front of you. You know exactly what it is. You know exactly how it works. You know exactly what you have to do. And then to flip that on its head is something that's very powerful. In the same way that, like, you have expectations for a loading screen. When a loading screen asks you, do you feel like a hero yet? Or how many Americans have you killed today? That doesn't work in any other medium. The back of a book cover can't do that. So, that's my answer.
Ben Minkoff.
This is tough.
I know, because you've got some recent games that I feel like you would have picked for this type of discussion, no?
I mean, there are definitely like some recent ones that could come to mind.
Sunless Sea sounds like that type of game. I don't know if best, but
Sunless Sea, I wouldn't say best yet.
But I'm saying, like, what it does.
Sunless Sea has some great moments.
Yeah.
Undertale has some great moments. One thing I was thinking of, though, I can even think of like some moments in Portal, like when you first kind of go around the corner and see that the test room, that like when you're first headed into that trap in Portal, and like kind of the test room's end. That really caught me off guard. But I kind of am going all the way back to Fumito Ueda's games in my head. Eco, I guess maybe Eco in particular, as something that really stuck with me.
Eco's a classic, so
yeah, where I don't know if it's necessarily a particular moment, but like you're building the relationship with Yorda over the course of the entire game, just through this mechanic of hand holding.
Yeah, the fact that you've dragged her across things.
Yeah, you have to take her with you and catch her when she jumps. And there's that little bit of rumble, which is really satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that, like, that there's another person on the other end. There's like some resistance. There's kind of this other intelligence.
That's just his games in general. The way you control aggro and Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, like those small things like add so much to what the narrative of those games becomes.
That adds to our whole thing of like hard and fast rules don't apply, because in any other context those are bad controls. The aggro controls are absolutely bad.
They're not responsive in the way you want them to be, but it's also like you've got this horse as your companion that does his own thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And that leads to the moments that happen later in those games and gives them impact. Both, in a lot of different ways. So, like, that's kind of what I think of.
Inaccurate guns in a shooter.
Using mechanics well.
Yeah.
There's so many interesting moments that happen with storytelling.
Silent Hill 2.
Silent Hill 2. It's great moments in Silent Hill 2. Even just like that monologue at the end of Silent Hill 2 is so haunting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a performance. That's hard to say. Is that like only something a video game could do? I don't know, but it really sticks with me. All kinds of stuff.
There is
I don't want to drag this too long.
So I was gonna say there's a sequence in that Dragon Cancer which I don't want to spoil it because I know Chris has actually humored the idea that he will play this game.
Oh, I'll play this game.
Yeah, please don't. I do want to play this.
You two really want... I'm not joking when I say it's the
I'm going into the heart of darkness, man. I don't care.
Like, alright, I was gonna say, it's very hard, I think, to convey hopelessness in a game and have the player buy it, because you should feel like, why the fuck am I hopeless when I'm playing a game and I've got all this control? But there are at least two major sequences in that game where you felt the hopelessness of the parents, and I had context for it on some level. Not the cancer part, just like dealing with a kid. Because I've, like, my niece and nephew grew up, I knew a lot of things they would do when they were kids and being fucking annoying.
They were really young. Yeah.
But, like, that feeling and the way they conveyed it through the mechanics, I felt was potent. One of them absolutely plays into the scene. One of the scenes is the scene where I broke and just fucking cried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, like, that game did it well. So, I guess it's 10 out of 10.
Yeah, you can't give it anything less, man.
Can't give it anything less. I really couldn't.
You sick fuck.
It's just, it's so wrong. I hate looking at the reviews and just go, you gave this game a 6. Like, what? What?
Monster.
You monster.
The death of your child was only a 6. I'm sorry.
I mean, I get the... Well, whatever. We talked about that last time. Whatever. Matthew, you gotta have a pick right now. Like, we've named every other game under the sun now.
Yeah, I can probably name one now, I suppose. If you're really gonna push me to, Gagan.
Yes, I am.
No, I'm kidding.
Now's the perfect time for the Chrono Trigger drop.
So, I don't know. I don't know if that one is the one I'd pick
that one
for
probably
storytelling.
would not. Yeah, no.
Yeah, for storytelling, no. I mean, as a game, it's like, the best game ever, but... Yeah, the storytelling thing, no, not really. I don't know. I'm probably gonna toss my vote into one of my favorite games ever. I'm probably gonna go for The Last of Us because of the way it shows brutality and the way it does it deliberately to show that you're doing everything that happens in the game that way.
The way
that was the idea. The idea when they make it was that the idea was supposed to be that you're in a world where you're actually doing this. You're actually just killing all these people brutally with shotguns and pieces of wood and shit. And I thought actually experiencing it in that way worked really effectively.
When you're choking people, everything's slow.
Yeah.
It's like a very slow strangling of that dude.
Yeah. And it's just all meant to also just be, that's meant to be the world you're in. That this is just what happens here. It's not meant to be strictly a video game in that sense, I guess. I mean, in that I don't know how to word it well, but the way the game's world works is that you're in a place where Joel would actually be doing this, not just because it's a video game, but that's just how the world is.
Yeah. For me, with The Last of Us, I think my favorite moment in that storytelling wise was the last scene of summer into the first, scene of fall and the first scene of winter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The way that kind of reverses all your expectations about your relationship with Ellie to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Was powerful because of what it had set up, and then suddenly you're following her and she's looking out for you. And then it kind of just leaves you on this moment where you don't really know what's going to happen next, and it holds you there with that first scene in winter where you have to hunt.
It's justified cinematic walking. It played life on hard mode and succeeded.
That's why it was our game of the year.
Yeah.
Like, it's really incredible.
I mean, when you describe it that way, Metal Gear Solid 5 had stuff like this, and The Witcher 3 doesn't, so I guess you could retroactively go back and fix that part, Chris.
That's totally gonna happen.
That wasn't justified, Gagan. That wasn't justified.
That bitchin' music is totally justified.
The music's great.
Are you talking about the intro? No, hell no, the intro sucks.
The intro to Metal Gear Solid 5.
I was gonna say, like, the Jeep drive with Skullface. and the part where they stare at each other.
Actually,
that was the most uncomfortable.
In all seriousness, now I have something I want to say about Metal Gear Solid 5.
Okay.
Can we not spoil it any further, please?
Sorry. Well, if we're doing spoilers, then never mind. I can't. It's definitely a spoiler. But there is one thing I was talking about. Yeah, never mind then.
All right.
Metal Gear Solid 3, shooting the boss. The fact that it's put on the player.
Yep.
Yeah, that actually might be the moment.
I don't think that's the best moment, but it is the best thing Kojima ever did.
Yeah,
I think that because I remember just sitting there playing that section of it and waiting and waiting and waiting. Why isn't he shooting her? Why isn't he shooting her? And I was like, oh, I have to shoot her. And especially in Metal Gear Solid, where it takes so much control away from the player so often. You watch this cool cutscene, and then it's, oh no, we're not going to do that this time. I think that's a really, because it flips the expectations for the game on its head and the series on its head, and it's a really powerful moment.
Yeah, I would agree.
My moment is a moment of taking power away from the player, too. The darkness. First time I died.
Oh, that ending is so good. Oh, the first time I died is so good.
Yeah, first time I died. Because you feel like a monster at that point in the game. You're starting to get all your powers together, feel like a badass, and then in the most crucial moment of the whole game,
that thing that's made you powerful is the thing that stops you.
Yep.
And they set it up so well, too.
Yep. And I think actually
in your case, you watched, what's it called with her?
I watched the entire To Kill a Mockingbird with Jenny, yeah. Watched the whole thing. I seriously think that's the first time I cried in a video game.
I didn't cry, but yeah, it was sad.
Yeah,
and I've always said, like, the people's criticism of watching Jackie all do all the cool stuff that you couldn't do throughout the game, I was like, yeah, but you missed a point! I was like, all that power came at a cost. You're watching him literally lose control of himself.
Yeah. No, yeah, and that's, if we're talking about a moment, that moment could be in a movie, sure, but you wouldn't feel as hopeless as you talked about for that Dragon Cancer. No. I felt like that was a hopeless moment. You can't do anything. You have to just watch it happen.
You have to suffer the way Jackie's suffering.
So, yeah, that, and, Will alluded to it with BioShock, the Would You Kindly. Again, don't think it would work outside of a video game the same way.
I think the Would You Kindly thing, it's not that it's a very good example of it, but I think what separates the Would You Kindly from the other stuff is that I feel like Would You Kindly is more like a subversion of the gameplay and how how it brings the story into it.
Right.
Whereas the other examples in the list are quite literally making a story be part of the gameplay.
Right.
I feel like the Would You Kindly is more, I mean, it's not feel like, it is more a twist than it is anything else. Which is the same way I feel about Braid. It's not so much, like, yes, the mechanics of the story come together, but it's the way it subverts an expectation is the big thing there. Whereas everything about, say, Journey or Eco is told entirely through the mechanics. You know what I mean? Like, that's all that the whole story is the mechanics.
And that's why those moments stick out to us more, is because we were tricked.
Yeah, those games are awesome. Yeah, so that's that. Probably Badger Chaz again for the next round of questions. No one's got to go this week, which is good, because I feel like we should take a week off of those for at least once.
Probably.
Before we run out of things we're going to let go.
Answered 3 questions, so I think we did pretty well.
Yeah. We did 3 questions. Even got pretty elaborate on some. We're pretty detailed on games today. I yelled at Ben. Sorry, buddy.
Play the witness.
Play the witness, yes.
That's the takeaway from this.
By next podcast, I will either have started Bully and Grim Fandango. Hopefully, I have Rise of the Tomb Raider beaten by then. Can't guarantee that because I'm playing the game on Survivor. Ben, I don't know if you will be on next podcast because if Chris beats Life is Strange, I want to aim for the spoiler cast and get Felipe and Aljoso on. But Ben, by the next time you're on podcast, what are you going to be playing?
I don't know. I was thinking of getting to Life is Strange pretty soon. I don't know if I'll be playing it yet, though.
But I need you to make a decision, buddy. When I get back to you again after I get through William and Matthew. William, next time you're on podcast, it might not be that too long. You're gonna be on Spyro 2, but like, do you have an idea what you're gonna do after Spyro 2 or? Spyro 3?
No, really, I'm trying to finish Ori and Metal Gear Solid 5. After that, I might do Life is Strange.
So then we can all end up at the place where we go, Phil tricked us with Until Dawn.
Yeah, or we could all have like the big Tomb Raider cast. So.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll finish Life is Strange.
You might not be on a podcast again for the next year. But, just
what are you going to be playing for a year?
For a year, I don't know. I know my next game is definitely going to be XCOM 2.
Oh yeah, yes. That's right. XCOM 2's up. So
I'm ready for that.
Expect that. I will have my initial 2 hours of Rise of the Tomb Raider up. They're going to be 1 hour videos each, I guess. I might edit some aspects out of the game, like the parts where I'm messing with the graphic settings, but considering that's really the only parts where I really talk with any consistency, I might leave them in there. Who knows? That'll be up by then. I know this is the lying segment of our podcast. I'm not guaranteeing that it will be written and posted. I am saying by the next podcast, at least on the back end of our website, I will have that thing on my stance on why, I will have something related to that Dragon Cancer written.
Okay.
Guaranteeing that. I'm guaranteeing that, at least on our back end. I'm committing
we
myself to
should
that.
have the site-wide top 10, and hopefully some other people will contribute their own top 10s for the year. Hint, hint.
I don't think not enough of us were able to make a personal top 10, so I wouldn't really do it. Just to see. At this point, I feel like it's a little late on that, but let's make that our standard next year, so that everyone's going to make a top 5, top 10. Anyway, this was episode 77 of the Endless Backlog podcast. It's a long one.
Holy shit, is it ever?
Oh my god, yeah. We are out.
Peace.